Good evening, Wakefield. I'm calling this meeting to order of November 14, 2022 of the Town Council at 7:03. Stands for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 3 is attendance. All my fellow counselors are here, and I see Clerk Sherry Dalton on the screen. Hello, Sherry. And we will go. Item 4, public engagement. Do we have anyone wishing to speak today?
Yes, we do. We have Anthony Guardia, who is coming over now.
Hi,
Anthony.
Hey, am I on? Hey, everybody.
You are.
You
If
are.
you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, and a reminder, we like to keep public comment to 3 minutes.
We'll test that. This is Anthony Guardia. I live at 27 Davy Lane in Wakefield, Mass. And I'm with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Stoneham and Wakefield. I want to thank you for having me tonight. I'm here for a few quick reasons. I want to give credit to our town council and to our town administrator. We met and we saw each other at the Friends of Lake Quannapowitt breakfast, and they reminded us the town meeting was coming up, and we decided to quickly work together. And at town meeting, the Boys and Girls Clubs will be providing childcare to any family who needs it free of charge at the Galvin Middle School. So we're happy to do this, and again, credit to our town leadership. Chairwoman, I don't want to give you all the credit, but I think it was your idea, and the town administrator who came up to us, asked about doing this, and I think it's a great service. And we're happy to do it and happy to be working with the town to provide it as much as we can. Do you mind if I move on real quick?
Please
Two
do.
other And in addition, I also want to thank, we're very lucky in this town now. We have great leadership at all levels that reflects well on the character. And you see that at the holidays. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't give a plug that this weekend is our annual Festival of Trees. It's at Market Street in Linfield from 2 to 6 p.m. We have over 75 businesses participating from Stoneham, Wakefield, and Linfield. And we're very fortunate we get a lot of grants. However, those grants are restricted to capital and programs. The money you see from donations and individuals and from events like the Festival of Trees, those donations go to things like gifts for kids in need in Wakefield and Stoneham. There's a lot of it. It goes to meals and holiday programs, Thanksgiving, and a variety of different things. So we're happy to host that. And in addition, this great council is wonderful. They've, I think, the four runners, and as you guys know, the Boys and Girls Clubs works with Santa to do a Santa sleigh throughout the town, and the whole town council is invited. But like previous years, I think Mr. Chines, Mr. Dombrowski, Ms. Smith Galvin will actually be running as reindeer and helping Santa come to Wakefield. However, the entire town council is welcome. I've heard that Steve has said he wants to pull the sleigh by himself up and down North Ave. We are here for it. We are going to see him and Bill Carroll are going to do it together. We'll see how far they last. All right, that's it. Did I get everything in under 3 minutes?
You were a little over, but all great stuff. So the highlight of what you said, Anthony, thank you for sharing. Town meeting is this Saturday at 9 a.m. at Galvin Middle School, and the Boys and Girls Club will be providing childcare in the cafeteria. So you can come and vote at town meeting, and your kids will have fun with staff from the Boys and Girls Club. And then the Festival of Trees is Sunday, the next day from... You said a time, and I didn't write it.
2 to 6.
2 to 6. The town council will actually be decorating a tree And so you can enter the raffle to get win that tree. I'll be working on it this week at some point. And then the running with the reindeers that Councillor Chines, Councillor Smith Galvin, and Councillor Dombrowski, and maybe some of our other runners.
Everybody's welcome. Everybody is welcome. I will reach out. If you want to run, you can.
You get to wear a fantastic reindeer
You-
costume
you
too,
get to
so
wear-
I mean, I think that should sweeten the pot for
You get to
certainly
wear,
our other runners on town council.
yes. Although Adam Rogers did tell me that the route was going to be extended this year, which Anthony did not mention. But lots of great events coming up, and thank you for collaborating, and thank you for providing that child care.
No, we're lucky. This town has great leadership, and all of you are a great example of it. So thank you for them too.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else, Sherry, for public comment?
No, Madam Chair, that's it for tonight.
Okay, great. So we'll go to item 5, opening up the public hearing for the tax classification. I need a roll call. I need a motion.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Great. And a roll call vote to open up the tax classification public hearing. Counselor Vincent?
Yes.
Counselor McLean?
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski?
Aye.
Counselor Denny?
Yes.
Counselor Tynes?
Yes.
Counselor Smith Galvin?
Yes.
And myself, yes. And with that, I will, there we go, Victor.
All right, good evening, folks. Welcome to another edition of Wakefield Tax Classification with your guide this evening, Victor Santinello, your tax assessor. Front page, I always like to put a picture of a home at the average single-family volume. Where did that come from? At the average single-family value in Wakefield, which this year is 701,100. Tonight we're here to discuss 4 items. Selection of a minimum residential factor, selection of an open space discount, granting of a residential exemption, and granting of a small commercial exemption. A residential factor of 1 would yield a single tax rate of $12.84. Simple division, the tax levy, $86.6 million, divided by approximately $6.7 billion in value, gets us to $12.84. Chapter 200, Mass General Laws, allows us to shift more of the tax burden onto commercial properties. And historically, Wakefield has chosen the maximum allowable shift factor to afford residential taxpayers the lowest possible share of the tax burden allowed by state law. Here's what it would look like at various shift intervals. I do them in 25% intervals. So at 1, you see the 12. We see a residential rate of $12.88. The residential rate I present to you here also encompasses senior tax relief. Okay? So when you get to the maximum shift of 1.75, that's our MRF, 0.910735. It yields a residential rate of $11.73 and a commercial rate of $22.46. Wakefield Senior Discount. This is our 3rd year. We had 226 applications, 215 were approved. The reasons why people aren't approved, they may miss some of the qualifying criteria. They may own a second home or a condo. The property may be in an irrevocable trust, things that we can't change. The average amount granted was $1,027. The maximum was $1,170. The minimum was $35. The total amount that will be shifting within the residential tax rate that makes up that 4-cent difference is a little over $229,000. It does add 4 cents to the residential rate, and the cost on the average single-family taxpayer to help seniors age gracefully in place and stay in the town that's been their home for so many years is $28.04. The average single-family value is 701,100. That's what it'll be for fiscal '23. And as you can see, a single tax rate, tax bill would be a little over $9,000. But when we shift to 1.75, It saves the average single-family taxpayer $806 in taxes. It makes the average single-family tax bill $8,224. The average commercial value is just under $1.5 million, but the median commercial value is $574,300. I like to put the median value in there because it's more reflective of small business type properties in town, your little shops and things of that nature, to give an idea of what the tax impact would be. And as you can see at 1.75, the estimated commercial property tax bill is $32,881, and the median tax bill is $12,899. At the maximum allowed shift with the selected minimum residential factor of 0.910735, our estimated tax rates are projected to be $11.73 residential and $22.46 for the commercial, personal, and industrial portion of our tax base. These tax rates can change occasionally due to rounding when we submit the tax rate recap. The average single-family tax bill, 22 versus 23. The average single-family value is up a little over 10%, and the residential tax rate went down a little under 5%. The residential tax bill, average value to average value, went up 5.4%, or a little over $400. The average commercial property went up 2.2%, and they actually saw a decline in their total tax obligation by almost $1,200. That's again because residential values have risen at dramatic rates, as they have been for several years, and commercial properties were relatively flat. And we did hit commercial properties last year during our state mandated revaluation, because we had a couple of years of data. We were able to get higher and tighter on values, but this year, not so much. Not a lot of sales activity, and properties, business owners still trying to figure the way out of the pandemic, what potential reuses are. The rents haven't dramatically increased or anything like that that would yield substantial increases to commercial values. Fiscal 2023 debt exclusion. It's the 9th year for the Galvin School. The debt exclusion adds a little under $2.5 million. It adds 34 cents to the residential tax rate, or $238 to the average single-family bill, and 64 cents to the CIP rate, or $935 to the average commercial bill. Sales activity, a little bit of change from comparing calendar year 2020 to 2021, and as you're well aware, 2021 is the basis for my valuations for fiscal 23. We had a few more sales. Days on market went down a little bit, but the average sale price up nearly 15%. And that's simply a quick look. You can find that data on MLS. Google all the single-family sales for the year, and MLS totals it up for you. For the open space discount portion, there's the definition of open space. Up to a maximum exemption of 25% could be adopted. Town has never voted for a discount for open space because no properties have been identified in the town that fit the above referenced definition. Residential exemption. Could do a residential exemption of up to 35% of the average residential value. It's only been adopted in a handful of communities. I worked in one, Chelsea. What happens is the residential tax rate will rise substantially before any discount. Approximately 30% of the homes in Wakefield would shoulder the burden. The reason those other communities do it, they do have residential properties, but a lot of their residential properties investor-owned. It's multifamily, so it's kind of shifting the burden within the residential tax rate to make those property owners pay for the people who own and occupy their properties. But Wakefield, our residential ownership is through the roof, with the majority of the properties being owner-occupied. So it would just shift the burden to higher value homes. And a small commercial exemption You do an exemption of up to 10% of property value for commercial properties only. Eligible businesses cannot have more than 10 employees as certified by the Department of Employment and Training. Building value cannot exceed $1 million. One business in a building could not qualify unless every other business in the building qualified, and the value is not more than $1 million. The exemption goes to the property owner. Hopefully, with a triple net lease, it would trickle down to the business owner, but we're unaware of any businesses meeting these requirements. I could probably name a few off the top of my head, but because how they pay their employees, they may not report to employment and training. Their employees may be consultants or what have you, and they wouldn't necessarily be on the list we get from the state. And the last few pages is just data surrounding towns fiscal 2022 tax rates and where we stand with average single-family values and what have you. Average single-family tax bill, 2006 to present. I don't know, it's getting close. I think we might lose 2006 in my next year's presentation. Start with 2007. Commercial tax bill, same thing, 2003 to present. Say goodbye to 2003. We won't see that next year. Tax shift. This is important because it shows what our surrounding communities do relative to how much of the burden they shift onto their commercial properties. And as you can see, Wakefield, Saugus, and Stoneham do shift to the maximum. Melrose could, but they stay a little bit below. With the exception of Saugus, that has the Route 1 business district, Wakefield has the lowest possible residential share of the tax burden, coming in at right about 80% after it shifted. That's all I have. Any questions at all?
Thank you very much, Victor. Councillor McLean.
Victor, I'm not sure that this is always widely understood, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the tax levy doesn't increase by 2.5. It increases by 2.5 plus new growth.
Yes.
So if that happens to be 4% in a given year, that will roll into the next year's base, which will then increase by 2.5 and new growth.
Yes.
How
Which
are
is
we doing? No,
which is
go
what
ahead,
new
please.
growth is designed to do.
Yes. How are we doing for abatement applications these days?
Not many. Over
Good.
the past decade, there's not a lot. We
Good.
average 50, 60 applications. All residential ones are inspected by myself. All commercial ones, if I need to get into them, I get into them. And we handle them quite readily.
Right. I remember being on the board of assessors years back, and I remember a fun conversation you used to have with one of my cohorts back in the day regarding commercial valuation. And my compadre would say, they're undervalued. And you would say, no, they're not. And I would think you were both kind of correct. But you, I will give you this, you were more correct.
Thank you.
Yes, because under the way it works, you had indicated we didn't have a lot of commercial sales last year. Well, it kind of really doesn't matter, right? Because it's valued on income and expense, as opposed to our homes, which are valued by sales, which happen all the time. I guess the only thing I would point out is that, just as a level of comment, not criticism by any means, is that there are some larger commercial properties in Wakefield. And I understand that the last few years have been tough, et cetera. But specifically, if you look at some of the larger properties, some that were purchased in '09, which might be considered kind of a distress year, really have flat valuations right up until whatever our most recent year listed here is, 2021. I would say the same if you look at 599 North Ave and that whole group. I think you would see that over time, I clicked on the previous assessments page, and a lot of the valuations haven't really gone up at all. Can you explain that one to me? Because that's not just COVID, that's a 10 to 15-year study.
Well, the property you cited is a Class C, Class D office complex. And I don't want to speak about individual things, but with your assessing background, you would know that maybe not all the tenants are creditworthy. They're running around patching the building rather than making substantial investments in their properties that would demand higher rents. that's always going to be a low rent building.
So you're not seeing rents increase?
No, not at all. Not at the one you just mentioned.
What about 301, 401 Edgewater?
301, 401, what they've been engaging in since Hobbs Brook took them over as far as management and ownership goes, they've been having, shall we say, a revolving vacancy. Because what they were doing pre-pandemic is moving tenants to other buildings so they could rehab that portion of, say, 301. They would move someone into 401. And 601 would move to 701 while they rehab 601. And I engage with their attorney and ownership team so that we have a handle on where we're going to put the vacancy. So if they're planning to do this building in this cycle, all right, we're going to remove some vacancy over here and add it to this side over here. The valuations I had when I first took over, they were, a majority of the cases facing the board at the Appellate Tax Board was from Edgewater Drive, being valued at well over $150 a square foot when the market only dictated $96 a square foot. So, you know, you have to go by the income and expense data that they supply you. I'm well within my right to question it, which I often do. And I also back it up by viewing regional indices, using CoStar, CB Richard Ellis, and talking to professional commercial appraisers and MAIs, what they're seeing in the marketplace.
Are the rolling vacancies, I mean, is this something that's now been caught up with?
I think so. These valuations, we talked about where I was heading with the values, and I had lowered the vacancies in some of the other buildings, and I won't know until they get the tax bill and file, but I think they're okay.
Okay, thank you. And one other thing I would point out is that we did have, back when I was on the board, 69% versus 31%. And now, as you state, we're down to 80-20. So it is a heavier burden on the residential taxpayer.
Absolutely.
That's why I would just wanted to bring up, you know, the idea that maybe as we come out of the commercial market slump, that we'll see some, hopefully some increases in those values. Because to me, it's all about relativity. You know, we have a 5.2% increase and the commercial goes down.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the commercial tax base, they're not beating down the doors to build factories and office buildings here. They're beating down the doors to build residential.
I'm
And
aware.
people are constantly improving their homes, and people are paying top dollar for homes, which affects that split that was 69. Now with the shift, it's only 80.
I
So,
do have some friends in these buildings though, and I know that many of them have been there many years and their rent never goes down.
Counselor Dombrowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Victor, for this, and always you're very complete, and I appreciate that every year when you make this presentation. Can you maybe speak to the issue of some of the commercial property that has been converted into residential? For example, I'm thinking somewhere like Grayson Lofts, for instance. Net, aren't we still, though, pulling more tax revenue from some of those properties? Because while it's residential, you know, classified, there's a lot more value, if you will, you know.
you are. It's obviously at a lower rate, but the value makes up more for the difference. But it goes against that 80-20 spread. It's moving it from one column to another column.
Right.
To the column that is already seeing, 10% increase in value.
But are we achieving ultimately more dollars in as a result? Because I assume that a lot of these, older commercial buildings that have been converted, I think about Foundry, a lot of the new residential there, I get that it's at a lower rate, but the value that we're, taxing that at, I would think
You're getting more tax dollars in.
Yeah.
But you're also contributing to the residential tax burden by that value shift from commercial to residential.
Yeah, I mean, I know that that was always a big concern in Linfield as they continue to go more. I mean, I've always understood them to be like they lost a lot of their commercial and it was becoming more residential. I don't know how much Market Street has impacted that, but I know having that balance is important, and there's only so much we can obviously do because it's rather like disjointed. If a property is allowed to become residences, for instance, like we as a town council, because there's just so many different layers to that, adding a ZBA and everything else. So, but I think it's something we need to be mindful of, because the more it seems like we're heading that direction, especially if we have vacancies in our commercial space.
Fortunately, the commercial segment they're doing okay. During the pandemic, the lack of cars did not translate into a lack of revenue. Money was still money, and money still came in, and people still paid their bills. Expenses did go up. Obviously, when people returned back to offices, they had to convert office space and do interior design. Maybe they had some government help to do some of that. Maybe they incurred some of the costs on their own. Yeah, rents do go up, but arguably in a building like North Ave, they don't go up tremendously. And I haven't seen an increase over the past couple of years simply because of the unsure nature of what will come once the country accepts work from home, things of that nature. I hear office space might convert to like hub offices where they're shared with multiple companies. That's where it seems to be the modern push now.
I'd have to just think that somewhere like either Harvard Mills or Crystal Lumber, though, had to have been, although at a commercial rate, a lower value than what we're
Yeah.
currently. I mean,
You're
I would
absolutely
think
correct.
substantially. And
Yes.
I mean, because Harvard Mills had all the vacancy, for instance.
Yep.
So that's, like you said, it's not like a sale transaction, like
Yeah.
like a home. And just the other piece to this, and I know that it's I'm not shooting the messenger here, but because you're doing the math on this, but in looking at where the numbers bear out, it's almost a 5.5% tax increase.
Yeah.
On the residential side, and I understand the circumstances behind it, but I still think in reality, a 5.5% increase, that's almost $425 a year for the average family. With what are we at, 7.7% inflation now? I just think that is too significant. I don't know that when budgeting was going on, we could have anticipated we'd still find ourselves in the current economic position that we are now. But everything has gone up, and I'm thinking about, our last meeting, we were talking about over 400,000 in home heating that we're talking about. All the kind of offsets we're trying to do because of how much people are struggling right now. So we have to be able to find a way to make this work without going up 5.4%. I think it's too high an increase, especially during these precarious financial times for folks. Thank you.
Anyone else? Counselor Vincent?
Thanks, Vic, for being here tonight. It's my first time going through this. The debt exclusion, I did have a question on that. You indicated that for residential tax rate, it's $238 this year. Isn't that down from $291 last year?
Yeah, because of the change in the
Because of the
residential
change.
tax rate base, yes.
So in addition to, is that factored into the $806 savings for the average taxpayer, or is that 50-some dollars in addition to that 806?
That's factored into the 806.
Okay. And the residential percentage of the tax rate, of the tax base in this year is 81.38, and the commercial is 18.61. And last year, the residential percentage was 80.1, is that right? So it's gone from 80.1 in 2022 to 81.38 this year?
Yes, because of, again,
Because of the
valuation
value- yes.
changes.
And the last thing, just to educate me on this for 30 seconds, the Chapter 200, which is actually Chapter 200 of Massachusetts General Laws 58, Section 1A, we have to qualify for that 1.75, don't we?
Yep. And
And is that an annual qualification?
The way it began, when the classification amendment was filed, the DOR really didn't think it through, how do we apply this for communities that want to shift? So they said, whatever your residential tax base is now, you can never, ever, ever go below that. Some communities were fortunate enough to be able to shift to 1.75. Other communities could only shift to 1.5. The way that needle moves, the 150, 175, or what have you, is wholly dependent on excess levy capacity that can impact your levy ceiling. So when we do all these numbers and the budgets are passed and everything, we file a recap sheet. There's a spot in there called excess levy capacity. Typically, we have it down to below $5,000 or $10,000, okay? In years before we had difficult finances, we would leave what we call tax levy on the table. And that's how it would manifest itself, in that excess levy capacity. Well, communities that find themselves at their maximum tax amount, what they try to do is and we didn't do it for this reason, we did it because we didn't need the money. But communities will try to pump up that excess levy capacity that increases the levy ceiling, so they could slowly move from 1.5 to maybe 1.55, 1.6, what have you. It's that expansion of levy ceiling that gives them the capacity to go further from the base that was established in the early 80s.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all the questions I have.
Counselor,
I just have
does
one-
anyone else have? No?
Just have one last point on this. I know that when we were going through budgeting last year, we were talking about making sure that we're being fiscally responsible in that. And I know that we've really been able to highlight a lot of the improvements or enhancements to services, for instance, which I understand is important. But we can't lose sight of the fact that that also comes at a cost. And I think we're seeing it now when you're talking about folks that are going to be paying, on average, $425 more a year. Like, that's not insignificant for a lot of families, especially in these times now. So I know that we're going into another budgeting cycle too, and I just think it's so incredibly important that we not lose sight of this side of it, because, again, I used the term last year, but we're baking in this 2.5%, plus new growth, but we're baking in the 2.5%, we're going to the max, and I just don't think that can be the presumption going into this process. And so I can't support going up in essence 5.5% on the residential tax.
Counselor Chines?
No, I think I see that point, and I think we're all cognizant of, I think, the burden that families face, and I think that's going to factor into the ARPA discussion that we have in a couple of minutes in terms of energy cost relief. But I think as we think about the decisions before us today, ultimately what we're doing is we are trying to fund a set of spending that town meeting has already approved. And I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we are providing adequate funds to be able to support the budget, again, that town meeting approved back in May. I think to the extent that, we are looking to provide tax relief in future years, it does have to be an expense discussion as we look at the fiscal 2024 budget. But I am concerned, and I wouldn't want to see us move in a direction where we're effectively underfunding the spending decisions that the town already made at town meeting 6 months ago.
I'll just say on that, it's not that we don't have any other resources to pull from.
Well, we do have fiscal policies that require us to sort of keep resources in place. And one of the things I think that we've got to be mindful of is we are drawing down on our reserves. We are drawing down on free cash. I mean, we saw that pretty clearly in the tri-board meeting presentation. And so I think we've got to be really cautious about how do we make sure that we're continuing to balance our budgets. The other thing I think we've got to keep in mind is that while families are struggling, voting for a lower tax rate does not necessarily help out those families that are struggling, because most of the dollars go to people who have high value properties. And in fact, most of the benefit would go, if you have a $2 million house, you're getting 4 times the benefit of someone with a $500,000 house.
The vast majority of people do not have $2 million homes in Wakefield. We're not talking about
there are $2 million homes in Wakefield.
The vast majority of homes we're talking about are not $2 million. We're talking probably around the $600,000 and $700,000 is what
Well, the median is
I'll let
700,000.
Counselor finish, please.
My point is, and we can talk about the value of individual properties. I don't think that's productive. My point is, though, that if we are going to target relief to families who are struggling, we should target to families who are struggling. I think lowering the tax rate is a very inefficient way of doing that, because a lot of the value of that goes to higher income individuals with high value homes, and that's certainly not what I'm interested in doing. I would like to see us target relief. Again, we're going to be talking about that in a couple of minutes with ARPA funds, but I don't think it's the right way to do it through tax policy.
Victor, do you have something to add?
I just wanted to jump in that this evening's votes, right, based on what I discussed, the minimum residential factor in particular, would yield the lowest possible tax share for residents. As far as what the dollars translates into, you're both correct, that's a function of budget. And not to be callous or anything, it's not my concern, it's just a metric that we apply. But technically, we're just slicing up the tax base to see who pays what percentage. And I just want to remind you that, the minimum residential factor that translates into the lowest possible share is what I had mentioned earlier. And that would be the lowest, when it translated into a tax rate, the lowest residential rate by law that this board could authorize.
Counselor Dennehy and then Counselor McLean.
I actually did have a question. The Wakefield Senior Discount, which is a great program, is that only available to seniors? Could that be available to people who might be facing particular hardship because of if there's layoffs or something like that, and could they apply, or is it only a senior discount?
This is for seniors as defined by the home rule petition we put together. There are other forms of tax relief, a hardship exemption, but the bar is rather high. The Board of Assessors is the sole adjudicator of those. And, people may come to us with an issue that is impacting them, but, okay, you come to us with that, but you have to show us a way out.
Right.
Because the tax dollars that we're giving you belong to you, and you, and you, and you. We're just not gonna come, oh gee, I had something happen and I can't work for 6 months. Well, no, you have to show us. And if someone's really behind on their taxes or what have you, we will try to work with someone to provide some targeted temporary tax relief to get them out of a jam, provide they're working to that end.
Right.
We're not just going to try to stave off an eventuality.
Right.
So, and the time to file that would be, when you receive the actual tax bill, not the January.
Okay.
Counselor McLean?
I've already spoken, I can.
Oh, I
didn't
I
see
just
yours.
had a quick question. Councilor Dennehy brought up the senior program. We have the work program as well. Is that still active and
Senior work op
fully
program.
enrolled, or
Yep.
is there still opportunities for
No, it's fully
people?
enrolled right now.
So is there any way for us to expand something like that? I mean, other opportunities?
We could expand that in the budget process
In the budget
next year
process.
and add more,
Okay. Okay.
But that is a
I just
possibility.
know that that's
It
another
is-
way
they
to
are
target.
sometimes hard to fill, actually.
Okay,
you know.
that's all I had.
Counselor McLean?
Just a comment based on the concerns I've heard expressed by Counselor Chines and Counselor Dombrowski. I would just simply say that, going back to after the special election when we were working the budget and I joined in February, there was very little disagreement on the council relative to the budgets that we passed through. And it seems to me at this point, we're committed on those. It seems that the way to ever propose something less than 2.5 would be in the budgetary process, starting at the beginning. Here, I feel that we're more at the end.
Steve, do you want to ask anything?
No.
No comment? Okay.
Nice job, Victor.
Thanks.
Thank you. And then I can't see Sherry on the screen. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak as this is a public hearing?
Yeah, no, there's nobody that wants to speak.
Okay, thanks. We still can't see you, but it's nice to know you're there.
Oh, I'm here.
There you go.
Oh, there we go.
All right.
Okay, nobody else wants to say anything? Then do we have some motions?
Yes, Madam Chair. Move that the town council adopt a minimum residential factor for fiscal year 2023 of 0.910735.
Second.
Great, any discussion? All in favor? Okay, that was 6 to, any opposed? 6 to 1.
Madam Chair, secondly, move that the town council not adopt a discount for open space for fiscal 2023.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? 6, any opposed?
I think it was unanimous. on
Was
that
it
one.
unanimous? Sorry.
Open space.
Okay, yes,
Yes.
yes, I'm sorry. That was unanimous. My bad.
All right, Madam Chair, move that the town council not adopt a residential exemption for fiscal year 2023.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous, 7-0.
All right, and finally, move that the council not adopt a small commercial exemption for fiscal 2023.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you,
Then,
folks.
Madam Chair, with thanks to Mr. Santinello, move to close the public hearing.
Second?
Great, and we will do a roll call vote. Counselor Vincent?
Yes.
Counselor McLean?
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski?
Aye.
Counselor Dennehy?
Yes.
Counselor Chines?
Yes.
And Counselor Smith Galvin?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you very much, Victor.
Thank you, Victor.
Thank you.
I'm taking chair prerogative, and we're actually going to go a little out of order. We're going to do item 9, the contract with our ambulance services for 2022 to 2025. You can pull up another chair. Yeah.
I look like I'm sitting anyway.
Hello, Tom.
Hello, everybody tonight. This is Kevin Turner. He's the Chief Operating Officer for Cataldo Ambulance. Behind me is Rob White. He's the Senior Director of Operations for Cataldo as well. Mr. Cataldo would have been here, but he had a prior engagement in Washington, D.C., so these two represent the senior ranking people in Cataldo.
I can jump in, and I think the board will remember, or someone will remember, the council will remember that in 2019, we did go out to bid for an ambulance contract. We had had a long-time ambulance service, we thought, for many years, maybe 20-plus years, and we decided that maybe we'd look around, had a very thorough process where we had 4 or 5 companies actually apply, Cataldo being one of them. We had quite a rubric or a matrix to go through, and the unanimous recommendation of police, fire, emergency manager, and myself was to go with Cataldo Ambulance. Then the pandemic hit, like 3 or 4 months later. And I can say, I'm very thankful that we did have partnership with Cataldo. They were fabulous from every step of the way, to servicing our citizens on a day-to-day basis, to really partnering with us in all of the COVID outreach that we did, in the clinics, in the training and what have you of our personnel. So I can't state enough how they helped us through the pandemic and really helped the whole town survive much better than maybe we would have otherwise. So 3 years passed very quickly because we've been mired in this for almost all of it, unfortunately. And I look at, in my position, you want to make sure you have the service, and you really look at an ambulance service almost by omission. Like, what isn't happening? We're not getting complaints. We're not getting people calling the office saying, hey, the ambulance isn't showing up, not having police and fire, carrying the burden because the ambulance isn't showing up. Ambulance is working well. They're working just incredibly well with our citizenry, covering when we need to do, and we'll partner more with them over the next 3 years, should the council feel that they can extend this, and our whole recommendation is that they do. And when we think about our population in Wakefield, some of our people that need a little bit more help, a little bit more handling, and how we're going to help train our people, help train each other, so when the ambulance shows up,
the people that they are helping are, more calm, more at ease at it. And so that's the areas we're going to do. We do not have to go out to bid. Ambulance services are not necessary to go out to bid. It's an exception to Chapter 30B. I do have a memo from Town Council on that in case anybody asked. We did go through a process again internally with, set up by our emergency management director, with, again, police, fire, boots on the ground that they're every day, and the unanimous consensus was to continue the partnership. So I don't know if Tom wanted to add anything.
No, I just wanted to say, Mr. Mayor really had put it, all the time that we were going through COVID, there wasn't a time, we ran testing sites over to the high school weekly for months on end, and then started back up again. Never were we ever refused. They came over. When we were running the clinics, they came over when we had Converse. They were our backup. Never went training. If the nurses needed to get some renewals, they jumped right in to help out. When we had the after-school program to get everybody back up and certified, they jumped in and did that. They couldn't help us enough. There's one other thing I wanted to mention we never got into. I don't know if you remember back, probably a couple of years ago, when we created the new position of deputy chief on the fire department. When we created that position, Dennis Cataldo and Dan Hoffenberg, who was a vice president at the time, approached me and said, look, is there something we can do for you guys and anything? I said, well, like what? He said, well, do you have a vehicle for that new position you created? And I said, actually, we don't. We haven't put anything in the budget. And they donated a fairly new vehicle, which the chief of the fire department is now driving in. But because of COVID, we never did a photo op, but they never complained or anything. So for the past 2 years, we've had a car from Cataldo. No one ever knew about it because we never had the time to take pictures and everything. But that's the type of relationship we have with these people. They can't do enough for us. So it was,
And they also come to every event. They're at every event, 4th of July, Town Day, never a complaint, never, you can't cover it, Steve. It's tough, and it's hard for them. We've heard from our police chief and our fire chief, staff retention and staff recruitment in all of these positions is very hard. Yet, they'll always answer the bell for us, so I think it's great. I think they've done a great job.
I do think, we really value collaborations here, as you saw with the Boys and Girls Club, and I do think over the last 3 years, Cataldo's just been such a great collaborator in town, as Steve mentioned. I never get complaints in the last 3 years, but I've seen you at chamber events and town day and flu clinics and all of that, and so it's much appreciated. That was not always the case, so we really do appreciate the collaboration. And Tom, we got to work on the photo ops. So Jen McDonald right now. But I never heard that story, so I appreciate the donation and the collaboration. So thank you. I will do Councillor Vincent and then Councillor Dombrowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Being on town council 6 months, looking at something like this gives me an initial impression of the inner workings of the town government. And this is a prime example of what I see as excellent government. And I'm not saying by the town council, we're the beneficiaries of your excellent work product, but I think the residents in town real briefly need to understand what you did, Mr. Walsh, and I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you in person yet, in putting this together. You put together a team of subject matter experts, including the EMS coordinator. You identified 5 companies that submitted proposals. Then you and your experts identified 4 focus areas. You applied each focus area to the proposals and narrowed it down to who, in your opinion, you thought was the best company for us to do business with. This is very succinct. It's very thorough. It shows a level of preparation that I think is outstanding, to the point I want to publicly say this, because I do think the residents of the town need to understand just how well this particular project was put together, in my opinion.
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vincent. Ed?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just also wanted to acknowledge Steve, because I know Town Administrator Mayo, back when we had done the same thing for a long while, and you had the thought, hey, why don't we maybe just like revisit this? And I think that is so incredibly important, because that's what really got, the RFP, and we got the bids in, obviously, et cetera, and the scope, and then you assembled this incredible, review team, really, that was under, Tom. You did a phenomenal job with everyone you had. So I think that's really important. Anytime we can be thinking about that, hey, why are we just doing things the same way? Why don't we think about how we can maybe do them differently, or just at least revisit to make sure we're realizing the greatest efficiency? And I think that this is a great example of that, Steve, because we had just been doing something, and it was fine, but I think it's been, I think Cataldo has been such a great community partner for us. It's just what you've been hearing from some others. You've been in our community. You're visible. You're there. I know in speaking with Steve, and all through COVID and working with Tom, you were just there, and that said a lot, because those were tough times, and it was anyone who understood anything about how to deal with what we were dealing with during that period, anything health related was a premium, and to be able to have your expertise and also your commitment, I think just speaks volumes to the kind of relationship that we've already developed with you. So I look forward to working with you again for the next few years. Thank you for that, though.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chines.
Thank you, and thank you, first of all, Tom, for all of your leadership in this area. I think, you've heard from the council, I think really well-deserved praise for your role in helping to manage the relationship. And for the Cataldo team, thank you. I fortunately haven't been the beneficiary of having Cataldo ambulance on site, and I'm grateful for that. But, I've seen you guys at, the COVID vaccine clinics. I've seen you at the community events, just hearing stories about how some of the fires this summer, particularly, in really rough conditions, that, Cataldo was there looking after our team, running misting stations and things like that. I really appreciate the contributions and the partnership you've had with the town. I have a couple of questions, one, Mr. Walsh, probably for you, and then one for the Cataldo team. First, Mr. Walsh, for this contractor, or Steve, it looked like there were no changes from the prior agreement.
It was a mirror, but there were some changes in.
The changes we made were, we were looking initially for dual paramedics in the ALS vehicle, but we've put it down to a paramedic and a basic life support, because it's just throughout the state there isn't enough qualified people to do it. But we still have paramedics on board, so that's not a problem we have. And the rest of it was just a couple of language things. Part of the contract, and so that people understand this, if we were not happy with our choice, even though it's a 3-year contract, Mr. Mayo could, in his power, send a letter out and say, in 60 days, we are going to change our ambulance service. Here's the date of notification. Now, the caveat to that is, you can do it, but you better have the backup. So we have those things installed. The other thing that we utilize is, part of in our contract, we have it that if there's an issue or we want to just talk, police, fire chiefs, myself, Mr. Mayo, we sit down with the hierarchy of Cataldo ambulance, and we've had meetings and we've discussed certain things that crop up. Maybe not something that's very important, but it's like, hey, we want to keep our hand on the pulse, and it's worked out. So that is also in the contract that states that. So we're protected in the agreement that we have. So to people rest assured that, it's a 3-year deal. Yes, but do you really want to go through this thing every year? But you have these mechanisms in the contract that if you had to get out, if you felt that there was something wrong, you have the ability to do it.
And just, you kind of alluded to this, Mr. Walsh, in your response, but I was wondering, if folks from Cataldo could speak a little bit about staffing issues. I mean, I work in healthcare. I see this every day in many, many, many ways in my professional life, and certainly know it's hit the ambulance industry as well. Could you talk a little bit about, any sort of threats and challenges that you're seeing, how you're working to address them, and what potentially you see as the outlook over the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, it certainly is a challenge. It has been since the pandemic. I think this industry, and Rob, he is a paramedic, for God's sake, but this industry has seen a shift since the pandemic. They worked hard, right? They went to every call, every house. During the pandemic, when the calls came in, we would go to the house. They didn't want to go to the hospital because they're afraid they'd die alone. So they said, just check me out, make sure my oxygen's right, and I'm going to be okay. And the employees, they were just, for lack of a better term, overworked, right? It was, they were in that, and they had to get up and do it every day when everybody else was afraid. And it just wore them down, and I think they made new career choices, and I think you're seeing that throughout healthcare. And one of the problems you have is the people that we need to work on these vehicles are a finite group of people. You need a certain certification. In the state of Massachusetts, paramedics, for example, there's only a couple hundred that are certified each year to become a paramedic. You've got all the ambulance providers, fire departments across the state vying for that group of several hundred people each year. That's very difficult. When you've got 308 cities and towns, they all need some. So it's the same thing. So what we try to do is we take the approach, if we've increased wages, we have to. We have to continue to support our employees with the inflation, so we continue to increase wages where we can. And with EMTs, same thing. You know, there are more that come through and get certified. We do have an EMT class that we offer. So we are actually getting people through the class that then continue to stay with us, and they work on our trucks. We just, last week, became an accredited institution for paramedic school. So we will begin that class, hopefully within soon, and we'll be able to train our EMTs to be paramedics. So to add to that state total, hopefully they'll stay with us and work on our vehicles, but that is the plan. We want to afford our employees to be able to further their education too on our dime, right? So if they stay with us, we'll pay for that paramedic education. So those are some of the things we're doing to try to combat the shortage, because this paramedic EMT shortage is nationwide. It's not just Massachusetts or New England, it is nationwide.
Well, no, certainly, and I mean, I know just being in the industry, I mean, there's also a lot of discussion around using paramedics for other kind of non-traditional services, whether it's providing in-home care, visiting support, and so forth. So that definitely pressures the supply of staff as well, I'm sure.
100%.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming here today and all the work that you've done in partnership with us here in Wakefield.
You're welcome, it's our pleasure.
And I just want to say, if Dennis was here, he'd be 100% on board. Dennis is all about partnering with our communities. You'll see us at Chamber events. Dennis and I usually sit at the same table, or if he can't make it, Kevin's there. But he's all about being part of the community. The rehab at 200 Water Street's already starting to take place, where they took down the second floor. That's going to be a really nice building for the ambulance, and he owns it. So he likes to give back to the community just as much as we get from you guys. So we're happy to be here. We're happy to be your partner, and that's what we are. We're a partner. Tom can call me any time of the day, say I need this, and I can call Tom and say, Tom, I need this, and we help each other out. And that's what we like to be, as a partner in the community. So we're glad we're here.
I don't have much to add, except I hear wonderful things about your training course. I've known some young people in town who have gone through it, and it's a brilliant way for you to, give back to the community and build that pipeline of your workforce too. So congratulations on that.
And also, I mean, for folks who are interested in healthcare, I mean, it's a
Exactly.
great way of getting into other parts of the healthcare industry, whether folks wanted to go to nursing at some point or whatever.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's certainly a growth field.
Yeah,
in
no,
terms
it's
of
great to
jobs.
have that opportunity here.
Great. Anyone else? Okay, so we have to take a vote on the contract?
Contract and, the vote, approve the contract and authorize me to sign it.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second?
And seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Proudly unanimous, I would say, Sherry. So thank you so much for coming in, and
Thank
we
you.
look forward to working with you for 3 more years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice night.
We'll
Thank you,
set up
Tom.
that photo op at some point, Tony.
Yes. And Tom, we'll give you our next meeting off, so you don't have to come in front of us
I was going to
again.
say, we'll be ready to trade in the car by the time
Yeah,
we do the
I
photo
know.
op.
Maybe it's a new car every contract renewal. Going back to item number 6. Dennis, thank you for waiting. We are going to get an update from the tree warden.
So,
Real quick, I told Steve that I'd be brief. I'm only going to talk maybe 4 or 5 hours on stuff. We'll go through the history of
That would be
Wakefield.
brief.
We'll talk about the history of Wakefield, the trees, but, you know, in a nutshell, so I've been talking about it for a couple seasons now. So we are at a real transition point for our forestry, for our canopy in Wakefield. So all the trees that were planted in the 70s and whatnot, they have far reached their time here for Earth, unfortunately. So for a number of reasons. A lot of the species, I mean, unfortunately, our native tree, the sugar maple, when I first, you know, back in '98, we were removing maybe 30 to 40, and they were stone dead. And then over the years, the removals increased to upwards of 90 dead trees. But there's a lot of different reasons for that. We're using road salt now, where back in the day we were using sand. The environment, the stress, the drought, and also the winds. And I just thought I'd touch base on winds. So before I get to the numbers real quick about our trees. So this past season, I had our crew on call. So we typically aren't on a regular on-call basis like the highway department. But 23 times this year, and that's because wind advisories are projected. So this past weekend, same thing. It was like 35. Not so much a threat because the trees don't have leaves, but it was a pretty solid 30 to 35 all weekend, and we didn't get any calls. So, you know, a few seasons back, every time we had one of those nights, we were getting called out, and it was that same, you know, disfigured Norway maple that had the top blown out. Now it's unbalanced. It has an unbalanced snow load or wind load. That leader is now hanging over the homeowner's house service, which has been taken off. We're now on notice. So, you know, I have to be the role as a tree warden and try to keep our canopy, but then we also have to step back and say, if I lived there and I had a tree with only one limb on it, leaning over my brand-new car and kids that are playing in the driveway, we're at liability. And we're at a risk now, much more than we used to be because of phones and whatnot. So we have to be savvy to that, and we want to try to obviously keep people from getting hurt. A lot of trees have been coming down, but a lot of it is some not so noticeable, and you know there might be some discrete signs out there. So it's not always that it's the stone dead tree. The tree might be kind of healthy with a few dead branches. Myself, my crew, maybe guys from the light department that are doing tree work, they're trimming. There are another set of eyes and ears out there, and we noticed that there's a bunch of mushrooms growing off the trunk. So that means that there's root rot, there's root decay. Go in, maybe do a little drilling, and find out that the whole center of the tree is rotted. Now, in a quick drive-by, the canopy looks fine. I see that, and when I can put a shovel into the base of the tree all the way, that tree needs to come down, okay? A lot of the construction that we've had lately, where we're managing sidewalks and grass strips, like Pleasant Street was a good example. You know, we have the projected project, but then some of these mature trees that we're trying to go around, sizable roots were compromised. When they get this big, now the tree on a non-windy day is moving, and the ground's moving. That tree needs to come down that day. So that's not something that we can sit on. As a tree warden, obviously, we don't have to have a tree hearing. We do practice Chapter 87 quite a bit. We had a tree hearing tonight, actually had 2 of them. I typically will have 2 to 3 a year. That justifies usually if it's a healthy tree. I don't feel that it should come down. We'll entertain the homeowner and we'll have a tree hearing. We post it, and by law, it's in 3 locations. So we typically do the item, we do town hall, and then on the tree. When we wait for 14 days, we have it, I hold the meetings. I don't have to, but I hold them with the advisory board, just so we have more discussion and we have, you know, note-taking. And that would be more in the realm of someone that wants to, there's a healthy tree, they want to widen their driveway. And then we remind them that the driveway can't be more than 20 feet. You know, wasn't necessarily the town's problem that you want to have 4 vehicles now. We have a perfectly good tree. It's not in our interest, not as the, you know, to remove the tree. We have a hearing. At that point, we make them be responsible for the removal. They incur the costs, the stump. We have to make a couple donations. We want to put 2 trees back in its proximity into that area if utilities allow. If they can't, then that tree would be placed in another part of town or in that neighborhood. So they pay the burden for that removal should it come to that.
any of these dead trees that are dying, decayed, or rotted, we don't need to have a hearing. We can just, we can have that removed. So, and what appears to be a bunch taking down, a lot of them have been compromised. So the light department's been proactively taking down trees on private property that are, same thing, declining, dead, threatening to do a power outage for them. And then they have other ones that while they're out, they've been doing an inventory in certain quadrants of the town. And then as that comes up, they give the list to me. I review it, and not all of them are approved. I might say that this tree doesn't require removal. It only has a few dead limbs. Other times, they may not bring one to the table, and then when we're going out, we find out that there were 2 more on the street on the backside that were horrible. Have a big cavity, a whole family of squirrels in it on the main crotch of the tree, so it's susceptible to just blowing apart. And we don't want to see that. So the other thing that I've been skimming over too is obviously the target zone. And I'm skimming over this, but target zone is basically the area that if that tree would have come down. And a good example is we just took an ash tree down in the outfield of Vets a few weeks ago where we had the dedication just over towards the Hartshorn house. Didn't have really a tremendous amount of deadwood. Typically, we would have chased that. About 3 feet up, though, hit it with a hammer. There was, we got a call, actually, there was a pile of sawdust, so it was loaded with carpenter ants and rot. Put a hammer in, and the hammer went halfway into the tree. Now, that's got 13.8. That's the power source for the whole west side. There is always a softball game going on the backside. There is a marathon of people walking the sidewalk, and there's always 2 to 3 lanes of traffic. So that's a bad target zone. We can't afford to have that go down, and we don't want to be aware. And obviously, if someone brings pictures to the table, and we decide not to do anything about that, that's not worth taking the tree down, and let's just get back and planting new ones. So that's where we are now. So this is actually pretty good, and this is exciting stuff. The last few seasons, we've been teaming up with the light department, and we've been planting short species under the wire side and taller species under the non-wire side. And we've been going through neighborhoods. And when we go together, we go through a tidal wave, and we're not getting minimal pushback. I think years ago, people would choose not to have a tree for different reasons, maybe as trivial as they just don't want to rake leaves, they don't want their lawn dirty. We say, no, the neighborhood's all getting replenished, 2 trees per house lot, that's our standard. And this is bigger than us. This is the neighborhood, this is the town, this is everyone buying in. And then once they see it happen, they actually appreciate it, and it looks nice. So Woodcrest, Forest, the Payon, these were desolate neighborhoods, 1 or 2 trees. We recently went into the Greenwood area that the macroburst hit, so the Flint, Howard, Grafton, we came up, Harrison, went up Pittman. Actually, it was even funnier because the light department was there planting when I had our contractor planting on the same day. So it kind of looked like a war zone, but when that was done, I mean, the entire street was replenished, or the whole neighborhood all the way around, and was out. So, and that's really the way to do it. So I do have some numbers for us. So we're moving around 90 removals this season. But we're up as much as 160 plantings this year. So that's a pretty good year, considering with the drought, we started, our plans to just late spring, it was so dry, that what was on the nursery floors was terrible. It wasn't worth purchasing, and they knew that too. And it was too hot, and we just figured we'd wait till the fall. So the light department, the DPW, we put about 76 trees in. The light department did 50. They've been sticking with that consistently, so kudos to them. They've done about 15 front lawn trees as well. And they're also working on some areas in the more, they call it the environmental justice area. And it sounds kind of a fancy name for it, but it's basically the commercial areas like North Ave. They want to do Jefferson and Water Street. And so North Ave, we just recently took a couple trees down that were, again, they had 1 limb on them over by the, like the music studio and the Jan Phillips side. Just complete eyesores. And I don't know why we kept saying we should get over there and take them down. Light department is all excited to help spend money on that. So we're taking it down, and we're going to make better cutouts and put some nice flowering trees in that area, so it's not so commercial looking, to combat the the T on the other side, which there really isn't any areas there. So we had tried that years ago on North Ave when the T came us, and we had a grant and we had worked that across from the Galvin. But ADA wouldn't, you know, the sidewalk was only a 4, maybe a 5 foot, and 2 of it was, they had cutouts like this, it didn't work. We couldn't get down the street with the sidewalk plow, so it wasn't a thought-out project, but now we're putting thought into this stuff, and so it's actually going well. They're gonna try to work on those commercial areas too, and then in the spring, we've already started driving around and getting a second round of our next neighborhoods that we're gonna go around and hit up, so. This all gets also put into our Tree City USA report. So at any time you guys want to, you want some good Friday night reading, I can get you a copy of that. And that actually shows what we're spending per capita on our forestry. It's pretty outstanding. So it's basically, they want to make sure we're spending up to $2, and we blow that out of the water. It's amazing how much money we are, but it's always about that we celebrate, in practice, Chapter 87, which we do tree hearings. We celebrate Arbor Day. We have a proclamation. This year was, we had a good hit. We celebrated with the library celebration, and we went just about 2 weeks ago, and we planted with the Girl Scouts, and we put a little dogwood tree back on that patio area. So that was a special program for them. They got their tree badges, but it talks about basically what we do and how many removals. It has a budget, and it really lists it, and spit that out every year. And we actually, I put the time into it to actually put real numbers in there, and you can see it from year to year, what we used to spend and what we don't, and it has everything from equipment and fuel depreciation and everything. So it's a good report. And I told Steve too, recently we had the tree wardens, Mass Tree Wardens annual meeting was actually at Town Hall, and we walked downtown to Public Kitchen, went there for lunch, and we took a little tour around the commons and the lake, and now we get some people have been calling in. Now they heard about Wakefield, some were familiar with it, and now they're kind of regulars on the circuit around the lake, and they comment on our, the trees and the tree work and the stuff that we have going on. So I think Wakefield's recognized as having a pretty good program. So, but I know I'm touching base. I could talk about this stuff for a lot.
I first of all, thank you so much. I've been doing this for 5 years, and I had no idea we had tree hearings, and that has blown me away. So that was super helpful. I think all of us are interested in trees, passionate about trees. So thank you so much for taking time to come in front of us. Councillor Tynes.
Thank you. So thank you for the update. And I have to say, just for anyone in public who hasn't, met Dennis before, I think I have learned more about trees and kind of, what a healthy tree looks like, how to look for a healthy tree and so forth, just in talking to you about town. As we've had different tree plantings and things than I ever have in my life. And so the fact that we have you here, I mean, you're a font of knowledge, and just the expertise and the commitment and passion you bring to what you do is really outstanding. I just had a couple of questions. Maybe the first one, Mr. Mayo, is for you. Could we actually publish the Tree City report and make sure that's available on the website?
I don't see why not. We can certainly do that.
Yeah.
I'm sure if we looked in the Tree City website, we could probably find it, but I think it would be great to have that information out there. And I think to that end, I also wanted to ask, it seems like we do have, whether they're kind of formal or informal, we have sort of policies and practices that we follow with regard to trees and tree maintenance, and I wonder if that's also documented somewhere, or if that's something that we could also kind of put some documentation together that's available to the public, so that when we get questions around why is this tree coming down, we can say general guidance is we're only taking down a tree pretty much if it's dead, diseased, or a safety hazard. Any trees that are coming down that don't meet those criteria have a tree hearing. Here's the process we follow for that. I think it would be helpful, just for the sake of kind of public information and transparency, to have that information out there and really make sure that folks understand and hear, I think, the great work, Dennis, that you and your team are doing to help maintain the tree canopy here in Wakefield.
Yeah, like I said, we have a great relationship with the light department, so every time they do an inventory and they do their list, that's another set of eyes and ears that are up in the tree that their guys get back, their trimming crew will get back to us, and then I have a great crew too, so, when they come in at the end of the day, they say, hey, we trimmed that back the best we can, but it's, this is the last time we're probably gonna be trimming that tree, and next time, and then when we get a call at night, that's the sad part is we've been around so long that when we get a call about a tree on a certain street, and we say, yeah, it's a tree on Emerson, we all kind of know and say, oh, probably the silver maple on the corner, but we're getting over that hump, like I said, a lot of those problematic trees, we've band-aided them so long that now I think it's time that, we're wasting time. If we're only gonna get one more season and it's disfigured and it's under a stress and it's unsightly and it is a threat, let's get rid of it and let's start the process all over. And in a few seasons, all the trees that we've been planting over the last, I've been doing it since '98, but they're all sizable trees now, and they do only, last so long in an urban setting. So, we might as well, if we're only gonna get 35 years out of them and they're at 36, we might as well, for the next generation, we might as well start the process. So.
And then sorry.
No, is that normal? Like, are we considered an urban setting that trees will only last 35 years?
It really depends on, truthfully, yeah. You have to, the days of getting 70 years out of a tree in a grass strip, I don't think you're gonna see it, because, we have gas a lot more than we used to. So gas is really toxic to trees. So, we lose probably a dozen trees a year to a slight, I'm not saying, a catastrophic gas leak that it is in harm for the homeowners. I'm talking just a slight one. It gets into the roots. Trees perfectly in canopy in July, and by August, it's orange.
That's fascinating.
So we have that. We have road salt. We have severe drought. We have the wet, rainy season where one year all the leaves are curled up and they're black. They're all getting the fungus. A couple seasons ago, it was fungus. All the Norway maples that were all in town, which are invasive anyways, but they were all shriveling up and dropping leaves in August. So they were dropping the leaves. Then we have, then the next 2 seasons, it's 100% drought. And the leaves that were, trees that were marginal, that we deadwooded a few times, they start doing a slow decline, and now it's the nail in the coffin. So, and we do sidewalk stuff because of safety. So we open up sidewalks a few times. Tonight's tree hearing was actually on 2 neighborhoods that we've opened up the sidewalks 2 or 3 times. They're locust trees, they're the wrong tree for the area, they're one-sided, they're leaning, they're listing, we've taken roots out, a whole slew of us, and, we're at that point, enough. They're cracking the walls, there's 4 sets of walls behind the backside of the sidewalk, stress cracks. We're gonna have to pay to have those repointed, the driveways redone. Let's end this misery, let's put back, we agreed tonight in the hearing that, new trees are coming back, they're gonna get 2 per house lot, providing utilities allow for it, and we start the process over. And if we can only cut roots so much, and then once the roots are compromised, that tree is just a ticking time bomb to the next windstorm. And back to these numbers, if we had a 40-mile-an-hour wind event, that was maybe 3 or 4 times a year outside of a hurricane. Hopefully that we don't get one, but we have 40-mile-an-hour wind events all the time. And so we're at that point now, and that's what the light department's been doing. So they don't want to look like, Barters and taking down our canopy. They want to be right there to say, listen, we want to get this out. We don't want to lose a pole, when telephone poles snap and 3 poles come out and the house service is ripped out, and there's 2 more maples that are exactly like the condition, the one that blew apart. It makes you think that maybe, this was an expensive night. God forbid if somebody's on oxygen or whatnot in a power outage. We're very fortunate to have them in town because power gets restored quickly, but, we want to make sure that maybe that doesn't happen. So how does it happen? We take down, we replant, put the right species there and get these events, and then, go another 35 years of having a nice tree, so.
Thank you, and
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. Just one other question I had, and this was going back to the microburst we had a couple of years ago in the legislative earmark we received to replace some of those trees that we lost. Do you have a sense as to where we are in terms of that replacement program and the spending of that earmark? It sounds like we've hit some limits in terms of supplies of healthy trees to plant this year. So is this something that's going to continue, into next season, or?
We will, we're gonna try to plant, I mean, we had a pretty good, so we needed a decent amount of money to clean stuff up.
Yeah.
So we had a tremendous amount of stumps out there. Our role on the town, my personal role is let's get rid of the immediate threat.
Yep.
And then we chase the stumps. Well, we were at a point where we had 150 stumps out there, and so we brought contractors in, and they were grinding like crazy, and our crews were coming in and loaming and seeding behind it. So that's part of the process of, like, we can't just say we're gonna spend $75,000 on new trees. We have to prep the site first. We have to get rid of the tree, get rid of the stump, redo the sidewalk, and then we come in, and when that's all done, put the new trees in. So those numbers of those neighborhoods actually did pretty well. Floral Way got replaced with all the new, the new crabs that we lost during that thing. Greenwood now has been more than rejuvenated from what came down in that storm. So, I mean, I think we're doing pretty well in terms of, I haven't seen what the bottom line is, Steve, on that
Yeah,
original
I'll get that
grant,
for
but
you. I have a feeling that it's very low,
Okay.
if anything, that's
Yeah.
left.
it's pretty close. I mean, we've been hitting it pretty well, and this year's numbers with just the amount of planning we did, and keep in mind, stock is going through the roof. I told you, I chuckle at myself, because I don't think I'm that old, but when I was doing it in '98, trees were $79, and I used to bargain for them. I'd say if I bought 30, I'd get them down to maybe, $59, $60 a tree. And now they're flat rate. They're $300. They're 300 plus. So it just doesn't go as far. So that's why it's more important that we're trying to really put the right species in the right location, and not put them down for a couple seasons and then take a chainsaw to them. We want to make sure that they go in and they got time to grow, and we do the right thing. So I think that's the best way to spend our money. So.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, no
Appreciate,
problem.
again, everything that you and your crew does. It's a
Yeah.
lot of work, but
Yeah, we got a good
our
crew. and
town's
they-
a better
they do
place
good work.
for it.
Yeah, they do. They're good eyes and ears out there, and they do a lot of work for us, so kudos to them, too. And anytime you guys have questions, by all means, you guys call my desk, and I can give you plenty of info on this stuff, so gladly.
Julie?
Sure, yeah. So, thank you very much. I definitely reinforce Jonathan's ideas around, getting some of the data out and all of that. I am curious about tree hearings. When I look at Chapter 87, it looks to me like you have to have a public hearing before cutting or removing any tree over, an inch and a half in diameter, even by the tree warden. So I'm a little curious why we've had 90 removals and 3 tree hearings. So like 3% of the trees removed this year had a hearing? Is that right?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
And why is that so low?
I mean, because the trees, we're not taking down healthy trees.
So I'm just going to play a little devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people come home at the end of the day and a tree that's been in front of their yard for 10 or 20 years is gone. And I agree. I mean, maybe it wasn't healthy, but I think it's pretty shocking to people to come home. And it happened to me, and I know it's happened to neighbors. And I mean, except in extreme conditions, isn't it true that a tree, I mean, you could wait 3 or 4 days and notice it? And have a hearing on it, or?
Well, the most, I would say 90% of the trees that we were taking down too, we were just, it wasn't the person coming home in shock. They were calling us saying, we're concerned about this tree. And then I tell them that we'll look at it, and I look at it and I say, all right, well, it might not have to come down today, but then we're going to be scheduling this when I have another, removal, so.
So maybe it's a process that if you're
Yeah.
taking a tree down in front of a yard where you haven't spoken to
Yeah,
the
we certainly can open up
homeowner, that there's a notice that's given,
Yeah,
because
we
I mean,
can-
I have,
Yeah.
anecdotally, but I have heard it.
Yeah.
I have brought exhibits, I chose to do my exhibits. So, and it sounds like you do this when you do a tree hearing, so you put a notice up on the tree that says, this is one that I found running in Melrose.
Yep.
This tree is scheduled to be cut down on or after date. So it's not a tree hearing, it just tells everybody who's walking by it in the neighborhood that, within a certain day, this is coming down, and you can call and find out why.
Yeah.
I would love to see something like that. And then this is from Cambridge, where they put a sign on an empty area, so like Greenwood had 2 years of emptiness. that says, a new tree is growing and it's planned for the fall of 2022.
Yep.
So I just wonder whether we might be able to have some things like that.
Okay.
I mean, I have no doubt that you are assessing everything and
Yeah.
I love Jonathan's, like, it's diseased, it's really helpful for us to say it's diseased.
Yeah.
It's a safety issue, it's a utility issue. I do think, but I do think that there are times where, people just kind of don't know what's coming and it's a
And
little
they
shocking.
typically, too, try to put a really big, oversized white X on it, and that's usually kind of a red flag that anybody that has been calling says, oh, I saw the
It's
white
coming.
X on it, and I say, yeah, that's typically the mark of death.
Yeah.
And they're usually.
X's usually are.
They're usually thrilled with that, so,
take
but
those.
yeah, this season, I mean, we did, like I said, it becomes a scheduling thing too, so obviously I'm constantly driving around. We make a list, and there's stuff that's on my radar that I say, this definitely has to come down this summer. Maybe not today, but I'm
Right.
gonna tie that in with this one and the other one around the corner, because I'm gonna need a crane, or,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, then when that finally lines up, we wanna jump, but, and the trees, and the trees obviously in that neighborhood, we ended up just actually taking 2 more down
Yeah.
on Howard, literally 2 weeks ago, and they were, what appeared not so bad until we went up to go get a hanger, and the backside of the leader was, you could see
Yeah,
through
no,
it.
I have no doubt that.
It was one of these, I mean, like, how it made it through even this summer was just, it almost takes your breath away
Yeah.
when the guys were wiggling it, and so that's something that obviously but we always can improve. I mean, we certainly can get back to trying to, inform them, we
Maybe
do,
so- I
we
mean,
put
maybe it's a
notices out all the
list
time when we
somewhere.
have to trim it and take it down, because we say, I need your cars removed and don't park in front of it. We will be removing the trees tomorrow on Wednesday. Those are notices that go out on a regular basis, because we don't want to tie
Right,
up a detail,
right.
and, but yeah, we can work on those areas.
And I just wonder too, I mean, maybe this is, I know that we have kind of probably backwards looking on the Tree City, but I would love to see us have a goal, like we want to put in X number, or we want X coverage over the next 10 years. I mean, obviously trees have tremendous value for carbon and for carbon sequestration and shading, and so I don't know what that will look like. I do think that maybe Conservation Commission or somebody's looking at maybe funding a study, or maybe you will have studies, but just something that gives us a goal to look at so that we know we're reaching it. We have the community tree program, so
We actually, Joey Conway is actually in the process of working for a grant with DCR,
excellent.
and that is actually to do an inventory on all public
I
shade
think that would
trees
be
and
great.
stuff. So, and they have various programs out there.
Yep.
Some towns have paid big money for them and then found out they weren't as wonderful as they were.
Right.
But this one seems pretty decent. It would just be a basic database,
Okay.
which is great, because
And we have this fancy new GPS mapping. Maybe
we
have
have
some
that
tree
in place
maps.
because, if I'm not here, I mean, me and my crew, we know where all the trees are in the problem zone. You could name a street and we could tell you what's
Yep.
on the street, but we're not here. It'd be nice to
You'll
have
be here
somebody
for a
else to be
while.
able to do that and look at it. So he is in the process of working on that. He was working on it last
Perfect.
week, so.
So can I just ask, one final question is, whatever happened on Sylvan Street? Were all those trees replanted?
They were.
Where we cited
The saplings,
we cited somebody for cutting down full
Yep.
trees?
yeah, so he did, one of the local contractors went in there, we planted, we sprinkled them all around, and, some are making it, most were growing. I think it was the safe call to put the small species in there,
Okay.
because it was already an established canopy, so, but no, it was cleaned up,
Okay.
and trees were planted, and, so, I mean.
Yeah, because, I mean,
And
the
a
public needs to
donation was
know it's
made,
really
so-
important to avoid cutting
Yeah.
healthy trees.
Yeah,
so.
especially by the watershed, so,
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, I
But
think
it's
they.
really important to avoid cutting any trees that are on property. I mean, there's-
Exactly.
Yeah.
That
we
are
have,
yours.
Yeah, I think the, message was sent, and I think the
Good.
homeowner, got the picture, and, obviously it was a big eye opener for everybody, which is what you need.
Yep.
I
Live
mean,
and learn.
I think people know that it's a crime, but sometimes people do things, and then they have to be reminded that it's not acceptable, so.
Great, that's all I have. Thank you so
Yep.
much for everything you do.
Counselor Dombrowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dennis, for this. I was hoping you were going to get into the geese control around the lake, but I know that's a separate.
Yeah, we can
Those
do
of
that
us who
another
are
night, so,
for the
yeah.
Quanah Power, that's a whole
heard of it.
presentation in of itself. I think first, the hearings that you're having, those are generally when people are looking to remove a tree when
Yep.
you deem it to be healthy, right? So it's really
Yes.
not the reverse. It's not like someone's trying to lobby,
Right.
petition you to keep a tree up that you deemed. Because I mean, it's in the grass strip. It's town property.
Yes.
So you have to do whatever you, in your judgment, is appropriate.
Yeah, and we say no a lot. I mean, there are often times that people, if their request is just not a valid thing, that I wouldn't even warrant a tree hearing. You have to do a balancing act, but sometimes if they really want to do a widening or they're doing something, a betterment on their property. But again, that tree been here for a long time and is a healthy tree, versus a tree that has one limb on it and its bark is falling off and it's half dead. I mean, might be something, we still may just do a hearing on that case because, we want to have it, I want to have something on records. And certainly, whenever it comes to somebody doing a development, be it a townhouse or a condo or a rejuvenation on a property, always have them on those because, I think it's the right thing to do. You don't want a contractor to, come in and fly by night and make it appear that he's just he's being padded or he's being allowed different standards than anybody else. So we always have one. It's been pretty quiet. I mean, a couple seasons ago, we had quite a few of them for that reason. And then it's kind of quiet. We haven't seen a lot of duplexes where people needed to widen their property and take trees down. And I think the numbers, like I said, a few years back, we had said the numbers that we were taking down, we wanted to see at least that. And we've been doing that. We've been making that number plus.
Yeah.
So, and this year even, we've been in the plus too, so.
We had a tree deficit. We're taking down more than we were planting, but now we've really flipped that now.
We're starting to flip that
So
again, yeah.
I think it's
so-
like, we have to
yeah.
move our goal now. Because
Yeah,
our goal was to
exactly.
just get, like net positive, and now
Yeah.
we're really beyond that.
And surprisingly on the hearings too, I mean, even when we took we took those oak trees down in front of the library. I mean, those were colossal part of Wakefield, but they were completely, the term is stovepipe, where they're hollow, 20 feet up, and they were rotted. You could drop shovels into the base of those trees. Of course, we did public hearings on that because we didn't get any pushback. It was a 100% safety issue, but.
And the one in front of the Archon House as
Archon
well.
House, the same thing. They were even
Right.
worse.
What about the one at the Greenwood Playground?
And so, it was that?
The Greenwood Playground?
Um,
There was a big tree at the Greenwood Playground apparently that came down?
Well, there was a whole grove of pine trees.
Yeah, so those came down.
They were bad.
Okay.
They were dropping big widowmakers
Okay.
constantly, so they were concerned about shade for the kids, but
Yeah.
it was such a bad, horrible, I mean, they were limbed up to 60 feet up. So when a limb did fall, it was a 4-inch caliper limb dropping from at least 60 feet. Just scary situation, so we got rid of that. And we put back a couple little ones in that mulch area.
Yeah.
Now
Oh,
as
good.
part of the Requiem.
And then like the next piece, Dennis, was we had a presentation of this proposed energy park, and there was discussion or I'll say concern by some residents relative to the deforestation of that area, especially because it seems like a more natural environment versus like to your point about the grass strips, we've talked, you and I have talked about that.
Yeah.
It's really tough. You need to be able to make sure you can, a decent caliper, but not so much that you can't fit actually the root ball,
Yeah.
comfortably in there and make sure it has room to grow. So I get that, but this feels like a different, situation because it's, it seems like a lot of mature trees in a more natural environment. So what has been your level of engagement with Gas and Light on that proposed project? Have you interfaced with them much on it and talking about it?
I mean, you're talking the commercial areas, or are you talking like more into the?
Well, the energy park specifically, which, they're talking about between the new Voc and the proposed new high school.
Oh, okay.
Have they looped you in on that?
Minimal, their architect had just reached out to me to try to talk about trees and species and plants on the
Okay.
project. So, I mean, I told them that, the Voc, it's not really my jurisdiction. I certainly will welcome my history and expertise of what they need. I said, but we also need to talk about what the maintenance plan is for what planting projects they're gonna put around the school and.
That's for the school though, I guess, right? But this is more specifically for the
land in between?
Yeah, like the power, the proposed power
Yeah.
energy park in between.
No, not yet.
No? Okay. Because I think that was something where, they had indicated they would be doing some replantings, certainly,
Yeah.
but I think it's
I'm
important.
sure
that
they
you be-
will though, because
but I
Dave
think-
has been, they've been reaching out to me on every level on when they wanna, picking my brain on ideas for stuff for their urban areas around town. So, I mean, if they're gonna do something large scale up there, I'm sure he would.
It just feels like you should, yeah, I mean, you're the kind of a central person to that,
Yeah.
because I think that one of the biggest concerns about that is that you're removing so much of
Defoliation, yeah.
the trees.
Yeah, I can reach out to Dave and touch base and see what the plan is, so.
I mean, I think it's really driven by gas and light, right? That's not the Vogue, that's gas and light.
It's really
all
gas
about-
and light.
that's
I
gas
talked
and
to them
lights.
this morning. They're looking at that. So I do think it would be great for you to connect with them.
Yeah, I will.
Because they're gonna try to minimize how much they have to take down and then maybe hopefully replace.
I just
what
think
they do take down.
residents express concern, and I think that it's important that we address those concerns,
Yeah.
and you're
Yeah, no
really
problem.
the best person to do that.
Yeah,
I
I'm sorry, I
would
was
say,
just
to make
confused,
sure
because
that,
it was
you know-
just 2 days ago that the Vogue reached out, so that's why I thought it was maybe all involved,
Gotcha,
so.
yeah, because,
you know.
well, that's another aspect too.
Yeah.
I know the Voc is, certainly in that proposed, what that would look like.
Yeah.
Okay, and then finally, I've seen some communities going to 2 bags, versus around just the base, but instead like going to a bag on either side, where the supports are, or the
Yeah.
stakes, basically. Do you think that's a better approach? I heard that it helps to lessen the impact of root rot. Have you heard anything to that? I know that we do the single bag now.
Yeah, we get even away from the bags. Truthfully, I'm a big fan of needle feeding. So, like all these trees that just went in, it's late in the season anyway. So the problem with the plastic bags is, real quick, they weep at all different rates. Some are perforated, and you put water in, they don't let water out at all. You have to sit there with a razor blade and put notches in. Then they weep out too fast. So to really guarantee that the trees, I mean, it's typically in the middle of the summer when it's a drought. I use it as when guys and crews are on vacation, and I have a one-man crew, we'll go out, but mandatorily, we got to do it regardless. And you needle feed it 3 spots down into the roots, so you're getting the roots to go down. So the problem with some negative about the bags is that when the bag's up top, the roots tend to grow laterally.
Yeah.
And now you got roots that are learning to grow down the grass strips, and that's why they don't want Norway maples, because they girdle themselves and they just go between the curb and the hot top. They start strangling them, and that's why they only get 35 years out of the maple, so that's why they don't allow, So, yeah, 2 allows to get twice as much water in it, but I think, the energy that you have to spend going out and filling the bags, it takes longer to fit the bags, and then they have to weep at different rates. So why not, if you're gonna be there for 5 minutes, I can put it right into the soil. The guys can, needle feed it in. I can put a little fertilizer in the tank and give them a real blast, the proper way to do it. And you move on, and that tree gets watered that won't need it for 3 days. So,
Well, Dennis, thank you for all you do. I know you're an expert in this. I've asked you
Problem.
so many times about where we are with the trees.
Yeah, no,
I always
it's
it's, it's my favorite text
fun
to
to talk
Steve,
about,
where we are with trees. Steve has had more than a few.
yeah, like I said, anytime you guys have questions,
That was a
reach out.
great botany question there.
Well, so-
That was great.
Yeah.
Any other questions from my colleagues? Counselor McLean?
Yep.
Did-
Yeah, sure. Didn't want to jump ahead of Ann.
No, I got
All
you
right.
and then Ann.
Okay. Dennis, what is the dividing line between gas and light? Is it their property versus town-owned property? In terms of where you'll be working and where they'll be working?
Are you talking up here or just in general?
In general.
In general, no, they're concerned with trees that are around the power lines. So they know that if it's a public shade tree, they send a request over to me and say, hey, we've had problems, we've had outages with these certain trees of this street. So they go out and then they put it on their grid. Then I go around and assess whether I think the tree warrants a possible removal or we just trim that tree up. If it's on the front lawn and it's private property, it has nothing to do with us. They'll solicit residents that have, the last one that was horrible was in Greenwood, is a private spruce tree that was rotted. I mean, they'll knock on the door and give them a notice and say, hey, would you be willing to lose that tree? And they'll even loop back, the next season to say, hey, would you be interested in planting a new tree on the front lawn? So that's good that they're doing that. But they're not going to go and just take it upon themselves and take a tree down that's on my property without my approval.
Right,
you know.
right. And,
Yeah.
and we've had an ongoing, as Councilor Dombrowski said, we're now flipped to positive, which is a good thing. We've had an ongoing program. About what do you spend budgetary, in a year for the tree replacements?
Well, I mean, we have, I mean, some years it's up, I mean, we have a $15,000 line item, that gets blown out
Yeah, that's not a lot of
instantly.
money.
I did that with the first planting we did, just on the, the trees alone and then the contractor price. So, we have the communal tree fund that people donate in, that fluctuates from season to season. Last year, there was maybe upwards of $6,000 to $8,000 in there, which was good. Then I've got my professional, a professional service line item that I can hit. We also have a line item that's for tree removals. So that was earmarked because the last couple of seasons was so bad with all the crane work and everything has gone up. So, it was the trees in people's backyards that we're still on the hook for that but to town woods.
Yeah.
So, I
Now,
mean,
we have an ARPA request in front of us tonight.
Yep.
Did you work on that?
well, out of ARPA, I mean, we had the 75.
150 is what's in there.
Yeah, and I mean, of that, like I said, we've been whittling down that the last couple seasons to get us.
No, this is new money.
This is new money.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So my question to you is, do you have a need for 150,000? Would you have places to put these trees? Would you be able to use that money so that we could get even further on the positive side?
I think, I mean, we certainly could put a pretty good dent in that. I mean, it's, like I said, part of the equation isn't just planting the trees.
Right, you got contractors, you got stump
We got
drilling.
contractors, we want to get the trees,
Yeah.
the garbage trees out of there and then just start all over, which is in planting the new ones. So, I mean, you got to figure if $15,000 is, I don't know, that's probably that's about 40 trees.
Yeah.
Just for just the tree price, and that's not the contractor to come in and put them in,
Yeah, No, I really wanted to go to your hearing tonight, but I didn't have enough time between work and here.
Yeah,
So
that's okay.
I didn't make it. Was that a neighbor-driven, the locus on, I think it was North Emerson, was it?
Yep, and Sycamore Road.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that, like I said, those neighborhoods have been done over multiple times. We've had power outages, they got roots, it's root flare, the sidewalks are all there, their front walks are being lifted up. Wrong species. I mean, back in the day, we planted a lot of locust trees. The locust trees do well in the square, but in the square, we've got 5 inches of concrete, we've got nice 6-foot beds, deep sidewalks and brick buildings, so we're not getting the heaving that we are on Hot Top. And it just, we can only do the sidewalk over so many times.
Right.
And then we're grinding those roots and the trees are compromised, so we really need to remove them. And North Emerson, it was cracked walls.
Yep.
And it's just because the locust roots are all on the top.
Yeah, and those were marked, Counselor Smith Galvin.
Yeah.
Every single tree.
Yeah, went down
Had
there.
a
yeah.
sticker on it, yeah.
That's
Yeah,
good.
And we do, we're doing
walked
the
that
hearings, like I
route.
said,
Pay more
yeah, we put them in the 3 places, so like I said, it's in the lobby of Town Hall, on the tree, and then we run it in the paper, and we'll actually run the second ad in the paper, actually, a week after we do it, because it has to be posted for 14 days. So,
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Appreciate the answers, yeah.
all right?
Counselor Dennehy?
Hi, thank you. It's very fascinating hearing about trees and everything. It really is. I have a question for you. The process, like, how do you know when a tree, how do you determine, like, if there's a tree on my street that looks like it's kind of, past its prime, how do you ever come to that point? Is it the homeowner that calls, or somebody on the street, or do you just know, like, do you do kind of a
I mean,
drive?
we get a lot of both. I mean, all the above.
Yeah.
Okay, we will get a resident that we remember that every time it's windy out or rainy out, it's losing limbs. It has a declining top. We noticed that we went and deadwooded the tree this season, and next season more than half of it didn't leaf out. So there's something going on there. There's either a gas leak or there's something going on, or there's rot. So if we see frass on the bottom of the trunk, it's full of carpenter ants and insects. So we'll drill in there, and I mean, they have some, $25,000 resistor drills that go into the tree, and they'll tell you how much pulp is in there. I mean, a simple drill bit will tell you that. You can hit it with a hammer.
Yeah.
So obviously, and then like I said, my crew is a good eyes and ears too, because
Yeah.
when they're out there trimming the tree up to go chase the deadwood or a cracked branch or a limb, they're up 20 feet up.
Yeah.
They can look down into a crotch and say, hey, listen, I can see daylight through this. So that might be something that often isn't a homeowner thing. That's like, we drive by and we see it, or we drive by and we see a tree breathing, it's called, and you see the tree doing this on a windy day.
Yeah.
It might not even be on a tree that we got a call. We might be in the street working on another one, and we just noticed that it's doing this. Well, that's something that's really bad that needs to be addressed ASAP. So it's really a whole slew of things. And I mean, you're not going to have a perfect inventory on every single tree because they're
Yeah.
living, these are living entities, so they change seasonally.
Yeah.
A tree that was in perfect shape, one season could be half dead the next.
Yeah.
It could be split apart, the roots could be, the sidewalk could be heaving up and could be moving. So, I mean, you really got to be savvy. So, and then between us, my crew, and then even the light department that's out there doing line clearing, they make notes to say, hey, while we were up there, you might want to put some eyes on this tree. And then we go by and we look at it, and then it might go on a pecking order. So we've always got a tentative takedown list that looks, we'll keep an eye on this one. We'll take a look. We tell the resident, look, it's fine right now. We'll loop back in the spring and we'll see how it leaves out, and we'll
Yeah.
see what's going on then. So, it's really, there isn't a one set process for every single tree.
So when the sidewalk heaves up, is that a sign that a tree's unhealthy?
No, I meant sidewalk is moving.
Okay.
In
Moving.
wind.
Oh,
You know what I
oh,
mean?
oh.
If it's like, you see the bark mulch and there's a little gap around the edges.
Yeah.
And that looks like it's recent movement.
Yeah.
Something's going on there. We may even put the homeowner on and say, keep an eye on this. Just
Yeah.
let me know. I don't know if this is new or old, but this looks like maybe something moved. You're here all the time. If you see the next windy day, go out there, and if you see that, call right away. And they're pretty, they're pretty good about it, so.
So so then you determine the tree has to come down. So you take the tree down, and then do you come back to remove the stump? Is that automatic also? So that's automatic.
We do our best, okay?
Yeah.
Like I said, if usually it's try to get the imminent threat out of the way.
Right.
That's our primary. And then the stump is, we'll go back, and then, depending on how busy the street is, we might need a detail. So if we need
Yeah.
a detail, let's get our bang for the buck, and we'll put 5 or 6 of them together. We'll make a day of the ones that we can do with a detail.
Yep.
And then grind those, and then, that's what, we were behind in stumps, grossly behind, but,
Yeah.
kept us out of court because we were keeping the trees from killing people, so.
Yeah. But then, okay, so then you get rid of the stump. Then do you automatically replace a tree that was,
So I typically try to make my removal list, start out my planting list for the next year. And then during the season, we have people that call and request trees that they want to see them back. So I think what you see is people typically do like their trees. They'll complain a
Yeah.
lot, and they don't want to rake, but they want the tree down
Yeah.
because it's a nuisance, it's scary, and it's been dropping, or they may have had their house service pulled up. Once the tree's removed, they miss it.
yeah.
And now their house is baking in the sun, and they miss having a tree. So it's usually about a season later, they're calling back to see if they can get one back.
Can other people on the street call and say they want that tree replaced? Or does it, they can too?
Yeah, and that's what would happen, is we'd get pushback on particular neighborhoods, and
Yeah.
we would only fight so much. I mean, if someone's really adamant and going through the roof of the tree, well, chances are they're gonna probably do something to it and kill it. So why don't we put that $300 tree, which is really like a $600 tree by the time it's planted, put it in somewhere that's really gonna love the tree and appreciate it. So from there, we go on, but, typically, once we try to go into a
But if a
neighborhood.
homeowner has the tree removed, that they say they don't want the tree is dead, and you're like, yeah, the tree's dead, we remove it, and it's not automatic that you'll just replant the tree.
No, and we may not be able to. It's very difficult to put it right in the same exact spot, nor do we sometimes want to.
Yeah.
So if there's something really, going on in the soil, or something that's really doing something bad to the tree, we may not want to put it in. And then because they now have a gas service, the one spot that we're going to put it back between the gas, we have the water and the sewer. We don't want to put them on all 3 of those. So now we kind of get stuck in where we're going to put it. So it's a gamble. But typically, we try to plant the seed and say, listen, we're going to be coming back, and we're going to rejuvenate this whole neighborhood. And that was tonight's process with the hearing. We
Yeah.
said, they were thrilled, they're going to get the tree down. We said, make no bones about it. Trees are going back, so
Yeah.
they're going to come down, stumps will be ground this year, sidewalks will be addressed in the spring, and everyone's getting 2 trees per, that's what we do with our standard. It's a zoning Board of Appeals. I mean, we've gone by those standards for years, so,
I get very sad when I see trees go.
yeah.
I'm very sad because there are these big trees. And my last question is that in the areas that, like the high visibility, like in front of the library, when you have to take down mature trees, can you plant mature trees back or?
So that's a good question. We've talked about that too, and that's a real big gamble. So, because they're big money,
Yeah,
and they've been growing in their little environment for a long time. So they're now a 15-year tree or something, and so to do a 4.5-inch caliber tree, I did a few of them, the ones at Sullivan Playground we did.
yeah.
But typically, when they start going sour, they take twice as much watering, twice as much spraying and effort, and they show environmental stress from the heat and all that. So the new trend now with all the studies and all this stuff is get a smaller tree in there that'll actually acclimate to the area. Occasionally, if it was a non-hot top area,
Yeah.
towns may spend $100,000 replanting a fully mature tree, and they use excavators, and they excavate it and they plant it in an area. It has a better chance because it's out in the field. But in something that's surrounded by street and hot top and brick, and it's just double radiating the heat off of it.
Yeah.
If that tree could die just as fast as a 2-inch caliper, so why spend, $5,000 on a tree that's only gonna be maybe, 20 feet taller? That the pin oak that's in front of the post office actually was a sapling that was taken out of the, Lonnie Island, right, the day before it got leveled. And the trees for Wakefield at the time, and it was just a little Charlie Brown of a pin oak. So if you look at that tree now, I don't know, what was that, 2000, 2003? I forget when we took over Lonnie, Colonel Connolly.
Maybe 99,
Yeah.
2000?
So we put that in, and that tree now is it's
Yeah.
a good 35 footer. It matches the other ones that were planted, and but that's the study that they're finding now, that is, a 2-inch caliper tree with healthy roots and soil and, fertilized is gonna go and is gonna grow at just as rate as a 4-inch caliper. And if it dies, it's a quick fix. You pull it out and you put another one right in its place. So,
Thank you. Very
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
That
I was
was
trying to keep it short.
no,
Steve,
I
so-
loved it. I think we all.
You guys have a lot, that's what I was saying. If you guys have questions, you guys can
No,
call me
I
anytime.
think we
and-
learned a lot, and I think what Julie said is really, I think there's a desire just to educate people more on what you do and what the department does, and, I think the signs on trees is a great idea, just to give people warning. I think you do such great work, and I think, we have a surplus of trees after years. I think to share some of these success stories, Steve, would be great. And then,
Absolutely will.
Director Conway, did you enter because you heard your ears ringing earlier?
No, I heard that Dennis was going to speak for 4 hours, so I thought, I'm sorry I'm tardy, I was playing back to back.
We did mention your mapping, right, mapping
I wonder if we
website.
can map trees on your GIS.
Yeah, so not to hijack the meeting, but to get a good inventory and a plan for planting locations will definitely create a metric for goals.
Perfect, you must be reading our minds.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dennis.
No problem.
Item number 7, American Rescue Plan Act. And I will turn it to Steve.
Thank you. So we are back to everyone's favorite subject, ARPA, or American Rescue Plan Act, and hopefully this will work. Just by a bit of review, and because there's so many dates swirling in my head, I need to put the dates up all the time. The federal American Rescue Plan Act was signed into law on March 11th, 2021, used for expenses from March 3rd, 2021 forward. Costs must be incurred or obligated by December 31st, 2024. So basically a little over 2 years from now. And the funds are received directly from the U.S. Treasury. I always put an asterisk there because that really isn't what happened. The money went to the state, and then the state kind of held on to it for a while, and then we got it. So under Wakefield's share, it was a little over $8 million, and we've talked about that a couple of times. A portion of it was through the county, and a portion was through the town. And that's because, Massachusetts, or at least Middlesex County, is not a big county government. In the rest of the country, county government is huge. So to make it fair, the federal government did that same analysis for us, and we got about $8 million. When the original opera came out, it had to do a lot with, you had to almost prove where you were spending it. We're going to spend it for this, we're going to spend it for that, and the Treasury actually changed that and said if you're receiving $10 million or less, which we are, we're getting $8 million, you can spend it basically on any government service. So that can be anything from the planting of trees to sidewalks to balancing positions and budgets and what have you. However, you cannot use it for, and they're very specific about this, no matter what you have, funding of debt service or replenishing reserves, settling judgments, tax reduction, pension fund deposits, which I know made Dan Sherman very unhappy at the FinCom. No, not really. Or any use of undermining of CDC mitigation practices for COVID. So I thought that was interesting that was put in there, and we're not suggesting using it for any of these items. So we've gone through this before. We have spent some of this money already, and this was approved by both the town council and town meeting in fiscal year 22 budget, fiscal year 23, and in fiscal year 24, we had, when we made the original presentation, proposed spending some money in the health department, although that may not be necessary next year because of some other fundings that are coming in, but wasn't a huge amount anyway. We did spend some money for school and first responder overtime, and that was during the tail end of the pandemic. Contact tracing, and a lot of communities stopped contact tracing earlier than we did, and then when the resurgence came up, they couldn't get the band back together to really manage that. So I think it was a good call made by our health department to continue to do that. Test kits, we have a lot of test kits. I think we're about out of them by now. We keep putting them out there for at town meetings and what have you. In fact, if I have some, I'll bring them to town meeting because people still want to use them. Clinics, elections, town meeting assistance, we did have to make a lot of changes at town meetings, and we ran a bunch of clinics. So that added up to about a little $300,000. Fire department overtime, which we did use, and fit court, which was one of the votes that the town council made. All been done. So then we talked about projects, and we went out and asked everybody for what they thought they would like to have it, both the town council and our department heads put in, and at the last meeting, I will not go through this again with you. However, we did end up identifying a little over 26, almost 27 million of projects, and we have 6.5 million available. So I thought a lot about, and we had a really robust discussion at the last meeting. I know the council thought about it, and really there are no bad ideas here, right? I mean, everything that is being presented has merit. But I did think about really a methodology in my own mind, how I would go and consider it, and came up with a couple of, and my wife would say you want to have a rubric cube when you grade papers. I never believed in that, but I'm becoming a believer now. So I have a bunch of my rubrics. Does a recommended use benefit a wide range of citizenry? So the range of the effectiveness of that. Does the recommended use benefit those in need? And we talk about there were people that still remain more disadvantaged than others through the pandemic. And the legislation talks about that. It's not incumbent upon us to do that, but I keep that in our mind a little bit. What were the public sentiments? We did go through a survey process, and I'm very proud of our staff, proud of the town council here for allowing that process to happen, because a lot of communities didn't do that. Very few did, but a lot of them didn't. And I think that, we got some good comments from people that came in, and we've talked about that in the past. What is the town council priorities and consensus? What are areas of consensus? And I thank you for sending in your pared down lists in the consensus that I tried to come up with. I also look for a multiplier effect. And by that, I mean, can ARPA funds be used in conjunction with some other grants that we've received to get a bigger bang for our buck? So in my own mind, I kind of thought about that, if we had maybe a grant for something that we could add into an ARPA item, that may even move us a little bit further. Are there any alternative resources? Is there a grant that could cover the whole item that maybe we should go out and get instead of using ARPA? I kept in mind, what are our normal budgetary decisions, and should certain items be part of our budget for not only sustainability, but maybe one thing that we should be doing? So one-time expense to me is certainly preferable to use ARPA funds then, okay? And the other thing is there an urgency? Is it something that we need to look at very quickly for whatever reason? So I put through all these and thought about this, and took all of your information into me, comments made at the meeting, and lists of meetings that you had for me. And I will maintain what I've said to you before. The only thing worse than having no money is having a little bit of money. And I think we're all struggling with that right now. And the other thing that is in the back of my mind right now, because of the economy and what's going on, we talked a little about inflation tonight, is we need to be prepared for the unexpected as we go forward over the next few years. So in putting together and looking at really what there was a lot of consensus on among the town councilors, I came up with a not expansive list that does save some money for later on too. And this is kind of my past one, but again, anything can be changed. So we talked about these a little bit. Energy Assistance Fund. I remain very concerned about the heating situation this winter. I will tell you, I'm getting calls daily from concerned citizens, or citizens that are concerned about other citizens to help them. So that's something that we talked about, and that may be a good funding source, a use for ARPA. We had a great presentation by the Health Department a week ago, or 2 weeks ago. Lake Corner Powered Cleanup. Now, this is one of those where we can really kind of combine with some other money. And you'll recall that we have $1.4 million coming from the Head of the Lake, Cabot and Forbes project. That for lake cleanup. That combined with this money to really take care of all the drainage, all the surface water drainage that's going into the lake and causing a lot of the problems. You add that to this, to this ARPA funds here, and we also roll in $75,000 for for a bathroom, I would think on the North Ave side of the lake, because the 200 Corner Powered Parkway is going to have a public bathroom there, the public bathroom here. You can do a lot of this cleanup with ARPA funds and cobbling that together with the funds from Cabot and Forbes, and really almost, and maybe, get rid of all of the surface water that we can that's going into the lake and causing some of those algae blooms and things like that. Maybe a good use for ARPA funds, combining with others. Lake Pathways, this is a very exciting project, and I really was looking at a lot more money here, and I think we all were looking at a lot more money here. Meeting with Bill Renault, our very talented town engineer, because the lake has been classified differently, meaning because it runs into the Saugus River, which runs into public water supply, anything within 500 feet around the lake is going to be very, very problematic. So some of those nice boardwalks in kind of the wetlands area, we were hoping to do all the way from Hall Park to Corner Powered Parkway, basically, is going to be problematic in some of the interior sections there, really between the cemetery and the yacht club. I'm still going to ask Bill Renault to look at that area to see if the wetland line is pushed a little bit. He's going by with what's on the map right now, but when we go flag it, maybe we can look at that, and maybe we can do a little bit there. And I think working through with our friends at the cemeteries is possibility of moving that even further. But this $100,000 would allow us to kind of redo some of the pathways in that, I want to say, what are those roads? Linda Road, what's the other road, Jonathan?
Fielding.
Fielding,
and-
down in there. There are some nice pathways that are already there. This would make them a little bit smoother, a little bit easier to use, using, they call it gravel, but think of the floral way, the way the floral way is. That would really help that. It's not huge money, but with North Ave being, made more pedestrian safe, you can see the telephone poles already being moved back further, so there will be some more room for, bikes and pedestrian. And that's going to be the power walkers around the lake, I would say. And then those who want to meander into a quieter setting could use that, and that's not a huge money, but I know it was very high on everybody's list. Rail trail / mobility project. So really what this means is that we would be able to allow for the completion of design of the rail trail from Salem Street to Forster's Lane, but also roll the design of Main Street from North Ave to Water and Water Street from Main Street to the rail trail, really doing that connectivity between the paved portion of the rail trail and the downtown. We would then could get on the tip list, we think as early as 2026, when the tip list would be done, to kind of do a lot of that area. In fact, we have a meeting scheduled anyway with the state at the end of this year to really talk about getting this forward. And I'll tell you that we have a great relationship, or our DPW department does, with the person who is in charge of all of the rail trails and what have you, and loves Wakefield, I think, loves the mobility that we're looking at, and really is very interested in these connections, has actually been here and walked them and really sees how they could connect into our downtown. This would allow us to get most of it done in that area, get all the design done and apply for it. But the real exciting part is that we do have some other money through grants, and the rail trail that's paved, the crossings will be done, and that'll be open to the public hopefully by next summer. Although I know some of you may be, not mentioning any names, but going around the the barriers that are there now, as have I. Tree replacement, we talked about it a little bit with Dennis. I mean, this would go between, I think, 300 to 500 trees, depending on, what had to be removed and what have you. Would go a long way into, getting us to that goal that we talked about, and working together with the director and his list would be great. And I think that that's a great use of this money. And again, things that everyone talked about, or a lot of people talked about. Sidewalk expansion. We heard more during the public hearings on what to use this, about sidewalk expansion in areas. I've had groups of Girl Scouts meet with me to talk about sidewalk expansion. And this, over $1 million would expand sidewalks on Parker Road, Elm Street, Lowell Street, Montrose Ave, Water Street, including some site realignments at the end of Montrose, Nahan Street, and North Ave. And in a couple of these locations, it also includes those flashers, so pedestrians are crossing, what have you. So that would be part of that there. WCAT expenses. We did receive a presentation from WCAT, and you received some information in your packet for a number of items. I certainly think that ARPA should certainly cover the expenses that WCAT had for new cameras and equipment and what have you. That's $137,000 of their request. They talk about money for the move if and when the new high school is built. I think that putting that in ARPA, frankly, in my opinion, is premature. It may or may not happen. But I also think that if it does happen, that it should be part of the project. It should not be part of ARPA funds. My opinion only. Of course, the council can say what they want. The other issues that WCAT has expressed concern about, and I share that concern completely, is with how the cable, has changed, cable industry has changed, that they are looking at a reduced income stream. I think that's something that we should certainly talk about going forward as a community. But I do have, in my own heart of hearts, I think when I talk about that sustainability and what have you about using ARPA funds, I think there's other avenues we should look at, but again, that's my opinion. A couple of, I call them kind of the smaller bites here. We've talked a lot about open space in town and items, town-owned land. What's very interesting about town-owned land right now is that it is very hard for us to determine how we own the town land, who really has control over the town-owned land, unless we do a title search on it. And we have a couple of hundred or more parcels out there that is it open space? Is it tax title property? It really isn't completely clear what it is. In working with the Conservation Department, this would really be helpful in putting their open space plan together, putting our open space plan together, and what the actual ownership is of that property. Because again, it's very different if it's tax title land or it's not. So something that would really help us, not a huge amount, but I think would help us move forward in other areas. MWA water truck, we've talked about that. We've seen it at a number of events that we've received from MWRA, and it's something that we can certainly purchase and certainly can use on our own with the events that we're having. Conference room, I'm saying Zoom hybrid upgrades. I think that every conference room that we have, whether it is town hall, library, schools, public safety building, senior center, civic center, anything else, we really should have those rooms set so that we can have a Zoom meeting or a hybrid meeting. I guess have a Zoom meeting anywhere, but have a hybrid meeting in those rooms. I frankly don't know. We don't know what's going to happen with the extension of the ability to have remote participation in public body meetings. It is extended through March 31st, I believe. Even if the state said that you could no longer have remote meetings without going through a bunch of hoops, I think that the fact that all of our meetings are filmed, everyone can come and participate either by hybrid or in person, and that's only a few of us can do that. A few committees can do that. I think that's really helped people to see a lot more of how government works, a lot more what's going on, and committees are very different. There are some committees that they would like to stay completely Zoom forever. And there's others that are chomping at the bit to come in. And right now, we don't have the capacity to have all of these meetings and accommodate that, because it just isn't, you have to have a good-sized conference so people can see what's going on. That's a pretty short money to get all those rooms done. Similar to the upstairs conference room at the town hall, which we've used for a few meetings. But even that if the group gets too large, it gets a little bit hard to see, so it's a little bit hard. Another thing that I've heard a lot about has been an ADA swing. The cost of the ADA, of the actual swing itself, is probably between $3,000 and $5,000 to get a good one. The real issue on the ADA swing, and I should come back that we have ADA accessible swings in our apparatus in a lot of our playgrounds, but this is where the actual wheelchair could go on the swing, which is something we don't have, and that's something that's been expressed. So it's the area around it that needs to be flattened and shorn up, so it's then larger, so it's easier for people to get off and on. So that's probably a nice bite. So based on all of that, based on what I've kind of pulled together from different members of the council, I have, the total is 3.8 million. That would still leave a little over 2.6 million that we could come back and my suggestion, Madam Chair, is that depending what the council does, we would come back in, let's say, 6 months or 4 months and say, hey, this is what's worked out. Maybe we need more money for energy. I don't know, in 3 months. Maybe we found out that there's, something changed. We got a whole bunch of grants through the federal government in this area. We could do other things. So there are a few things that we certainly, that were mentioned by some councilors that could be done later on. I think energy improvements, I think there'll be a lot of grants in the future on that. I'd like to see that fleshed out a little bit. And again, we'd have money to partake in that. People talked about housing and a housing trust. I personally don't know enough about a housing trust right now. I need to do a little bit of homework. I know they just approved one in Watertown, and I had breakfast, my manager breakfast, the Watertown town manager is now in our group. We have really extended our, our circle of friends. We go from Watertown to Winthrop, so I'd like to learn about that. That's something, we have some money to start doing that, or available in the future. We talked about facade programs, and I think that's great, but we just got a $100,000 grant for that. So I would use, that's one of those, rubrics I would use, and I'd say, hey, we got a grant for that, let's use that for that. The one that, an item that I wanted to put in here, personally, and I wouldn't have for my kids, but I care about my grandkids more, obviously, and my kids will say the same thing, is a splash pad, which I think would have been great on either the Spalding Playground or up at the head of the lake. That's coming in a bit pricey because of the filtration system and everything, and that's $500,000. I think that if that was half that, I would think about, but it might be a bit pricey now, and we have to look at that. And there were other items that are answered that I think, we talked about playgrounds, and I think that in our, we've put in some grants for playgrounds, but we have been doing one playground a year through our capital program, and I don't want to lose sight of that. That's been a very methodical, thought-out program, and that's still going to continue on. So these are just my suggestions or recommendations, I guess I should say, based on what everyone sent in to me, as based on that criteria that I put together, based on where there was areas of consensus, I tried to find that. And I am happy to answer any questions. I will say this, that I think that whatever does happen tonight, whether it's for trees or it's for playground or rail trail, what have you, is that, my suggestion or my charge to our town accountant would be that each specific project would stand on its own. So we would put an account for, let's say it's trees, and let's say it's $150,000 for trees. And we could track that specific to itself if we found that after the end of a year, that, geez, we didn't, maybe we should have only gone 100. The council could say, oh, we planted all the trees we could. The council could say, let's move that back to the same, ARPA fund bucket and use it somewhere else. That probably was a bad example for that because we'll probably go over, but, maybe the lake cleanup might be a little bit less and we could move that forward. So I'm happy to answer any questions, Madam Chair, but thank you for the opportunity.
No, thank you for that presentation, and I just, Steve, 5 years doing this, I called you as soon as you emailed me this, and I said this was one of my favorite memos that you've ever sent us, because you've never sent us a memo spending this money. I think it's really smart of us to save money. I think I would encourage my colleagues to think about, 5 months from now is April before our Maytown meeting. I think it makes sense, to see the progress of how things have come. I don't think Julie's MWRA water truck will cost $55,000, so let's use that as the example, right? But I think 54.
But that's still $1,000.
But I think tracking each of the projects and then us, in April before we go to town meeting, having a better understanding of how much is used, and then learning more about some of the remainder stuff. I think that's a great proposal. But I do want to thank everyone who did do the survey and did reach out to us, because this is a new process. This hasn't ever happened before. Towns are doing it differently, and so thank you to everyone that engaged, whether it was a splash pad or a pathway around the lake. And with that, Councillor Tynes.
I will, happy to kick off some comments. So first of all, I just want to echo the chair's comments. The proposal you've put together, Steve, I think is incredibly well done. I mean, I don't know how you could have more effectively synthesized that the beginning of that funnel, the $27 million of ideas, into a plan that I think does reflect the feedback you got from us. Certainly not perfectly. I mean, there are things I would have liked to have seen here that aren't here. I'm sure there are others as well, but I think you've done a really nice job of trying to, again, synthesize a lot of information into a proposal that I think has a lot of merit to it. I also like the fact that there are dollars reserved, both because, we don't know what we don't know yet. I think also because there are things that we put out here that, require some further analysis. And, I've been a big proponent of the Lake Path, and I'll be the first to say, we know that there's a path forward, no pun intended, for, the portion that we talked about between Linda and the Yacht Club and Lakeside Office Park. We do have some challenges that we need to look at in terms of wetland space on that section between Linda and the edge of the cemeteries. We have conversations we need to have with the cemeteries as well. And so I could see us coming back at a future date for those sections to say, we figured out we can do X, Y, and Z in these spaces. Maybe there's some more opportunity here. You talked about housing as another example. I'd love to do something in housing. I personally am not sure what that is yet, and so I like the idea of taking some time to really study what does a housing trust entail, what could we do with it, what are we allowed to do under statute, and really taking the time to come up with a comprehensive proposal and maybe bringing something back to this body once we've been able to do that research. With those caveats and with the understanding that I think we need to have some subsequent conversations around the 2.6 million that's left, I have to be honest with you, I'm entirely supportive of this. I mean, I've asked a number of questions to Steve prior to the meeting. I've tried to kind of poke holes in pieces of it, but again, I think this is an excellent start for the funds that we have, and I think each of the projects that's on here would be really significant and really make kind of a material impact on the town and really help us kind of create some of those legacy initiatives, whether it's sidewalks or trees or a lake path, that really would pay dividends to the community. So thank you for putting this together, and again, very, very supportive of what's in here.
Thank you.
Councillor McLean and then Councillor Dabrowski.
I was just, kind of a point of order, are we going to vote a slate here? Are we going to take this one at a time? I'm just curious as to how this is going to progress, because I do have questions for Steve, and I do have items that I believe I've indicated to Steve that I thought should be on here.
Yeah, so I think we're
I'd like
having
to
a
discuss.
discussion now. There's been no motion made, so I think ask your questions, and then when we get to a point of making a motion, we can do one by one or add on others. I don't think we do a slate, it sounds like. So, yeah.
Probably not.
Okay.
So I think right now it's questions that you
Questions.
have, comments.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, one of the items that I thought was particularly surprising to me that it wasn't on the list at all was the Gas and Lights #1 proposal, which was a need-based program. And they had a very detailed proposal. They had two other items. One was a solar project, the next was a solar project, right? And 1.4 million on the third solar project, I would say, okay, that's not going to make the cut. I thought that we had some consensus, at least from what I was hearing, on the Gas and Lights the very first proposal, which was a need-based program similar to fuel oil, right? People who are blasting the heat pumps instead of the oil are still perhaps not as cost increased, disadvantaged as others, but we'll still have a tougher time. And I thought for sure that the first project at 337,500 was detailed, well thought out, and if we have a problem with fuel oil, we're going to have a problem with gas and light as well. And in terms of the items that Steve discussed, 1 through 10, I don't want to go through the litany on every item that we have here, but a lot of them are met by this. I mean, who is suffering? What's the immediacy of the need? What's the intent of ARPA? So I was just very surprised that was omitted, and would like to see it be considered.
Just so I understand, are you talking about giving help to people who need help on
Yes.
paying their bills?
Yeah,
Paying their bills?
that was.
Okay.
It's right here. It's the gas and light, proposal.
No, this is something different, I think. Yeah, you have the Energy Assistance Fund in here, but you're talking about actual, like, going in, doing weatherizations, helping people finance.
There were a number of
Yeah.
items. There were weatherizations, there were increased rebates on heat pumps. They had they already have the system set up to deal with 60% or 80% of income. It's all very detailed. It was before the council. And it seems to me that, you know, if we're going to have a need-based program for fuel oil, I would think we'd all consider being supportive of a need-based program that would assist with the other forms of energy we have in town.
Well, to me, the if you can't pay your bill, your fuel bill, whatever the fuel is, that would be something that we would look at in the energy assistance program. It's not just oil. What you're talking about is improvements and repairs through that. To me, is I'm drawing a distinction between the two, personally.
Okay. Rebates for heat pumps and weatherization for low-income homeowners.
Okay.
Yeah. You're saying, well, I guess you're saying that's not necessarily somebody that's having trouble paying their bills. I guess that, to me, that's kind of a
I mean,
fine
I
line.
do agree that we should do everything we can to weatherize our home and to make it more efficient, but when I just think it's going to be very difficult for people that are, personally, if they're really low income now and they need help paying their bills, they're probably not going to go out and pay anything towards a heat pump, a new heat pump.
Well, there are a variety of
Yeah.
programs here. Weatherization, there's also requirements, eligibility for zero-interest loans. If you can't afford a 5 or nowadays with rising rates, higher interest loan, and you're, you know, maybe you would say, oh, gee, I can do a zero-interest loan. You know, there are just a number of items here that I thought would be very beneficial. You know, not just also from a societal energy standpoint. The more we can do to assist in, low-income people and households in terms of their energy needs. So I guess I don't see it as dollars and cents as you do then, Steve, but I thought it was something that was worth considering. Beyond that, I thought it was worth considering the solar project at Audubon, which was their second submission, which would be 225, and the gas and light would probably put in another 100 or so into that program, which would inure to the benefit of the housing authority. I thought that was another very, very good idea on their part.
No, there are no bad
Just a point of
ideas.
information on this topic. And this, I don't know if anyone here is able to answer that, or if this is a question to refer back to the gas and light department, but are there already state dollars available for like things like weatherization and heat pumps and so
Well,
forth?
the Inflation Reduction Act, they just came out. I was at the Vice President's announcement. There's going to be a lot of money for these things, so I couldn't agree with you more that I think it needs to be done, and I think zero-interest loans, and I love the idea of coupling it with this energy assistance fund, but I think it's one of those ones that we look at in a couple of months, because I do think that they've just freed up a lot of Inflation Reduction Act funding for this exact purpose.
Right. I think one of the things that we hear a lot is that there may be, and I hear it from Steve on some of these other projects, you know, that there may be other money, right? So I had asked, you know, that we do have a quarterly report, and maybe quarterly is too much. I don't want to get crazy here. If it's 6 months, okay. That we would have, like Steve said, line by line, here's what we've appropriated as a town council, as a chief executive office of this town for specific projects, and we would know what was spent, what it was spent on, and what wasn't spent, so that we can come back and reallocate to other potential ARPA usages. So again, that would apply as well, for example, when we get to the lake. I don't want to take these out of order, but when we get to some of the other items, that we may wind up getting the grant we didn't get a couple of years ago, especially when we show up with our 1.4 million and maybe another 800,000, that we're looked on much more favorably to keep the phosphorus out of the water in the first place. So, yeah, I see that. I don't think it's a reason to leave this program out, but if it's an idea to revisit it later, then that's fine.
I do think you should get quarterly reports, by the way.
Okay.
Period, yeah.
Great. I agree. Let me ask another question, then I'll move on. If we're not going to consider that one, it sounds like there may be a plurality of, let's leave that off the table for now. I'm curious, Steve, about the rail trail. So far, town has allocated taxpayer dollars, I assume, at some point in the past, please edify me, probably for the study portion of this, for the planning.
For the plan, I guess.
Right.
Rail trail plan.
And if I go to the Wakefield site, it says this is going to be a federal and state-funded
Right.
project. if I go to the DOT site, it says, in terms of the 11.5, estimated total project cost, 10.669 million. Construction cost, estimated total federal participation, just a little over 11 million. What I'm trying to understand is, because I don't exactly understand from your brief description what it is we're doing. Are we getting ahead on the cost with taxpayer ARPA dollars? Are we getting ahead on the construction? I think at one point in the past meeting you had mentioned enhancements. I don't know what those are. Maybe flesh this out for me. What is
Sure.
it that we're proposing to do?
Let me try. So, as we know, we have a paved section from the Galvin to Salem Street.
Okay.
Okay? That's from the power line coming through the National Grid did that. Okay? So that area has been paved, although some of the other amenities aren't there. So that's been done. We have had a study done, engineering work done, I should say, from, not for that area so much, because that was already done, right? It was done by others. But from the firm that was coming in was doing from Salem Street all the way through the Reedy Meadow to Peabody. Okay? We have now kind of finished, we allocated money for that, both towns did. We have now finished the first section of that, the first, 25% or whatever it is. Engineers, when they come in, they say 25%. I think it's a lot more when you look, but there's more plan that needs to be done. There's a little bit more to get to the construction docks that needs to be done to get the actual final finish line, getting it funded by the state, the federal government passing through the state or directly from the feds. But from what I find out, most of it goes through Mass DOT, even though it's federal dollars. So that's who we work with. We don't work with anybody at the federal level. We work with Mass DOT. So the was it $1 million, I think? The $1 million would do all of the engineering work to get us all the way to Foster's Lane. And the reason why I'm not going to the Linfield line is because we would have to end the trail somewhere where people can go. I can't end it under the 128 bridge because it's going to take a long time, probably years, to get through the Reedy Meadow. So that's kind of why we kind of separated. I don't want to say divorced. We separated from Linfield and that. So this allows us to do that portion of the rail trail. Plus, it allows us to do the engineering work, the leftover engineering work for the connectivity from Main to down Water Street to where the rail trail crosses Omelette headquarters, that connectivity, and what I would call a southern section of Main Street from Main Street from Water Street going down to the junction. So that would allow us to get all the engineering work done in all that places, and then get us to a point where it's a $10 million, $11 million construction project that we can get much quicker through the state, because it's not, was it 26, 27 million that you talked about before? It makes us do that bite a little bit less.
Well, it says the project is planned to be funded through the 2026 Transportation
Okay.
Improvement Program.
Yep, still would happen.
For the Boston Metropolitan Planning Organization. I guess what I'm asking is, are we spending money that if we waited
No.
would be covered?
We have to do the plan money. They will do the construction money. The construction money is 10, 11 million,
Okay.
which is how all those projects work. It would be nice if they'd do the planning too.
But this isn't something we've gone to town meeting with.
Part of this, yes. Oh, yeah.
Or have we?
Both sections, yes.
Okay, so the town meeting hasn't funded what we're going to fund out of ARPA?
The town meeting has funded, the town meeting money has been spent with the exception of, I'd say, $300,000 that will also be used here to help with the design.
Okay, so this is an additional cost.
This is an
that
additional cost, yeah.
You're saying we would put through ARPA as opposed to
Going
to
back
town
to
meeting?
town meeting, absolutely.
And the only other question I had, because it's not on the list, is the senior housing. I realize it's been touched on a little bit. I know that you have more experience with this than I do, because when you were on the Board of Selectmen, it was probably the last time we did a project. up at Harts Hill. What was that, maybe 10 to 15 years ago, maybe more, I don't recall exactly. But that involved the Department of Housing and Community Development, it involved a HUD loan, it involved various entities, and I know you don't like to be a landlord, but the town isn't the landlord there, right? It's transferred to the Housing Authority. And I would hope that, when you look at who is disproportionately affected and all the 10 items, I can't think of many groups other than seniors that weren't more affected by COVID, certainly by the death rate. And this has been a stagnant area for a long time. And I feel like a salmon swimming upstream whenever I talk to somebody about it. And I'm making calls on my own time. I called someone from the Mass Housing in her car. I'm not sure how well received that call was. I'm working through Jason Lewis's office too to try to get to the right people. But I think based on your experience, what we really need is an understanding from the council that this is a project that we want to do. We want to do a senior housing project. Because if we don't, it won't happen. If we do, it may not happen. But there is definitely a need here that's been unmet for so long. And my feeling is, which is why I said $1 million to a trust, I've been told, and apparently you've been talking to some people too, that this is not uncommon for a community to set up a trust. There are various legal entities that we probably already have. Town council isn't here, otherwise I'd ask them. I'd say, do we currently have a legal entity through the Housing Authority that could hold this money? And the seriousness, again, it's like the lake money. The seriousness that we would show by putting forth money and then perhaps land, Butler, who knows, a building, maybe, town-owned, and ask the people who do this for a living to assist us in terms of setting up a workable program. We would at least find out whether it could be done. If I look on the Department of Housing and Community Development website, I see senior projects. Someone's doing them somewhere. And I hate to think that because it's difficult, that we're not going to at least attempt to go through, perhaps put in an application through the Department of Community and Housing Development. We have a new governor. I don't know how that's going to affect things, but maybe see, what the priorities are at the Commonwealth level in terms of helping a community such as ours with this ongoing need. There's a recent letter written to the local paper, and I totally agree with it. What are we doing for the seniors? I think we should be doing more in terms of housing. So I'll get off the soapbox now, but I would hope that with your experience, having done this some years back, and with the sort of resources that we have at our disposal, that we can, as a council, move forward and say, okay, that's a priority project for us. And I'm not going to give the details because I don't have them yet. None of us does.
Councilor Dombrowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Steve, the question on the bathrooms, do we have a sense of what the actual cost is going to be for the bathrooms by the lake? Because I know we got, what, 75 or 80
We got
from the state?
75,000,
75
yeah, it's
from the
not,
state.
that's
not even
that's
gonna-
going into the pot.
Yeah.
Yeah, with it, yeah,
Right.
it's not, yeah, so to speak, yeah.
Literally.
I didn't really mean that.
I mean, it's like
We will
couple hundred thousand,
also,
isn't
I
it?
mean, you're looking at, maybe that's a third of it, if we're lucky, maybe less.
Because I'm thinking like we're at least 200,000
Yeah.
of those, right?
Yeah,
Like, all in.
but my thought would be that, well, first of all, that there's a real need, there's a real call for that. We get calls for that all the time.
Yeah, no, I mean,
You know?
I support it. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
say that. I'm
That
just trying
would,
to-
that is kind of factored into that entire amount there.
Of the eight.
And also, but what isn't factored in there is that we do have a vocational school up the hill. That would be great to have them do some of that project with us. From the plumbing standpoint, from the electrical standpoint, all
If we
those
can, I
things.
just know we had the issue when we were trying to do that
Yeah,
Water Street.
but I think that this would be probably a little bit different, a brand-new project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just trying to get a sense of ultimately
Yeah.
when you kind of peel out to actually get
Yeah.
the bathrooms, because the 75,000 is not
Yeah,
going to pay for
that's
the
worked in there, but it's,
Yeah.
with 75 would add to it.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, so,
Yeah.
but realistically, probably another like 150 to 2, right?
Included in that figure already.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly, but,
Yeah.
okay. And then the other piece was just on this idea of, there was a lot of talk, especially when we were getting input from residents about this idea of placemaking. And I think that, I know we've talked about like around the Rockery there, and so I'm not saying that we necessarily have to do it now, but I know Bill was still working on trying to pull out exactly what that portion, like kind of by Artichokes and like that area, what that portion would look like cost-wise. So I'd really like to have that as a higher priority going forward, because I think it allows for a lot of opportunity. There's a connectivity issue there with, around the rockery that we would solve for with that. You know, we basically already have a plan, you know, for that, but he was just gonna try to pull out some costs on that.
Okay,
So I
I'll have
think-
Bill give me those.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Counselor Vincent?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Steve, could you go back 2 slides, I think? And as you're going back, I just want to get on the soapbox that Councilman McLean got off about senior housing. And I do want to remind the council that in 2003, in the Wakefield Housing Master Plan, there was a critical need for senior housing. In the Wakefield 2014 Housing Production Plan that lasted from 2015 to 2020, there was words about a critical need for senior housing. And in the current master plan, there's language in there talking about the need for senior housing. So we're spanning 20 years where we've identified that 18.69% of our population is age 65 and older, that we have a critical need for senior housing, and we do need to do something about that. And then the 7 of us are in a position with potentially using ARPA funds to do that. The question I have on some of these items, like the Energy Assistant Fund, we actually had a presentation made and it delineated, they actually asked for $415,000, but they delineated the reasons why they needed money and how much they needed. And WCAT came in with their proposal, which frankly is much greater than the 137 that you have on there. Even if you take the $250,000 off for the relocation, that still leaves $384,000 left in their request. And you've got a figure of 137,000 there. But before I get back to that, on some of these others, we never got any piece of paper that explained how these figures were derived. I mean, how do I know why is $800,000 the amount that we need for the cleanup? Why isn't it $900,000? Why isn't it $700,000?
Well, in the memo that I sent to the
Yeah, I saw
council,
the memo.
those figures are from the town engineer.
Okay.
Yep.
Was your reason for the WCAT expenses because the 137,000 is what they've incurred as of July 2022, and the rest are future expenses?
Yes, with some other caveats.
Are you envisioning?
So I think, for instance, the $250,000 for moving costs to a potential new building.
Well, I don't mean that one. I
Yeah.
mean, for instance, they
Okay.
sent us, one thing about WCAT, of all the organizations that had ARPA requests, they had clearly the most comprehensive proposal. And in looking at their current proposal, for instance, they have June 30th, 2023, $50,000 cost to continue to broadcast board meetings. And then by June 2024, another 80, December 24, another 60, and June 25, another 60. None of this has to do with relocating to the new school. How do you envision we handle that part of their proposal? We going to handle that in those particular
Well,
different dates?
I think what I said is that, unfortunately, with the change in the cable industry, all cable companies, public access companies, have a revenue issue right now. People are not getting cable, so the revenue issue is changing. That's not going to go away in 2025, even if you did that, even if you covered expenses. So I think there needs to be, personally, the council can do whatever they want, there needs to be a discussion about that. Part of it there should be a streaming bill that should be passed at the state legislature to cover that. I mean, that has died in committee. That would help places like WCAT, but I don't have any control over that. So to me, that's kind of a budgetary talk that conversation that we should have and will have, I believe. And maybe it's something that we look at as long-term sustainability.
Okay, thank you. And about a half an hour ago, I purposely stopped talking so that I could ask you all to give me 3 minutes. 3 minutes of your time to talk about the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial. It's a 120-year-old structure that's graced our town. So if I talk about it for 3 minutes, I'm talking 1.5 seconds for every year that we've had the memorial. In 1896, Harriet Flint bequeathed $10,000 to be held in trust to Wakefield to erect the memorial. In 1898, Wakefield unanimously accepted the bequest at town meeting. The memorial was built for $12,799, $11,000 of which and change came from Mrs. Flint, the interest on her $10,000. and the other 1,000 came from public and private funds. In June 1902, Wakefield held a dedication celebration for the memorial. A couple of points of historical significance about it. 1902 is halfway between the present day and the end of the American Revolutionary War. It's also a bridge between our South Reading and Wakefield history. In 1902, the town of Wakefield honored the residents of South Reading who gave their lives to preserve the Union of the United States during the Civil War. The sculptor of that memorial also sculpted the bronze doors in the U.S. Capitol. The builder of the memorial also erected 87 granite monuments at the Gettysburg battlefield and numerous other monuments at significant Civil War battlefield sites. At the 1902 dedication ceremony, George Thompson, the chair of the Wakefield Board of Selectmen, in accepting the monument, vowed, quote, "In the name and on behalf of the citizens of Wakefield, we promise that it will ever be well and tenderly guarded," end quote. Since the dedication ceremony, Wakefield has not allocated any money towards repairing the monument. Weather, an act of vandalism in the early 1970s, and normal wear and tear over 120 years have resulted in major structural damages. The joints between the main part and the four pedestals are pulling away. There's gaps in the joints, there's missing limbs on some of the figures, and the surface on the granite figures are heavily eroded. In 1973, there was some money spent to repair it after the vandalism, but that was done by private funds. There's been an estimate of $80,000 to $150,000 in 2007 to repair the facility, depending on the results of a $3,500 special test. Another inquiry was made in 2015 by Wakefield, and the cost had increased by about 10%. To date, Wakefield has not even funded the $3,500 for the I forget what kind of test it is, radio something test. Here's some different funding options for it. One would be if we were a Community Preservation Act community, but we are not. This town voted in 2002 not to be part of the CPA. That's important because one of the things that the CPA does is set money aside to preserve historical buildings and resources. Grants. Wakefield needs to apply, or Wakefield needs to have money allocated to apply for some of the grants that I did some research on. The Massachusetts Preservation Projects Fund is a state matching grant program that last year gave $800,000 for 17 projects. The Veteran Heritage Grant is another Massachusetts grant, which is a state matching grant program that matches up to $15,000 per project. Both of them require you to have allocated funds before you can apply for the grant. The third option is to have it in the town budget, but as I said earlier, there's been $0 spent in the last 120 years for that. So ARPA funds is the best alternative to start the process. It enables Wakefield to apply for grants while obtaining an updated repair estimate. At a minimum, allocating $65,000 at this juncture would be appropriate. $5,000 for the special test that would need to be done to see what kind of other structural damage is inside, which will determine how much the overall cost would be. $15,000 to match the maximum amount of the Veterans Heritage Grant, and $45,000 to match the maximum amount of the Massachusetts Preservation Projects Fund. I'm no mathematician, but if they had $800,000 last year divided by 17, that's between $40,000 and $45,000. If the town council agrees to allocate those funds, I encourage you to hold me accountable for the progress of that particular project. I promise to work with the Veterans Advisory Board, the Historical Commission, and town officials on the project. If the town council is not satisfied, you can reallocate these funds. If you are satisfied with the progress, perhaps we can allocate additional funds once we receive an updated estimate. Wakefield made a commitment to preserve the monument when it held a dedication ceremony in 2002 and accepted the memorial. We have failed to live up to that commitment. And here's my last thought on that. I had the privilege of speaking at the Veterans Field Sign dedication on Veterans Day. I concluded my comments with a promise that Wakefield would cherish this gift and safeguard it every day. I don't want a member of the town council in the year 2142 advocating for funds to repair the sign by quoting me and then stating that we have failed to live up to our commitment to preserve the sign. So I respectfully request that we consider tonight allocating $65,000 towards preserving the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial. Thank you.
Response to that, yeah. Sure.
So, thank you for that. And I'll say that I'm the liaison to the Historical Commission, so we actually spoke about this at the last meeting. And I think the biggest unknown there is just what this restoration would cost. And so I had suggested to them that I thought that we would be able to find the resources to at least have the testing and get a good faith estimate of what we'd be looking at. And then from there, I think we're better positioned with that knowledge to know how to go forward. So Steve, I think we probably have the resources for, just in the general fund to be able to, because we're only talking a few $1,000s.
Was it 3,500?
Well, I think it's actually more than that all in, but there's the one company that does it, and they do all these sorts of monuments, and so.
I'm sure we can find that.
I think we can find, well, that's what I told,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I told the Historical Commission. I'm like, I'm sure we can find that, because then I think we're at a better place to understand orders of magnitude here. Was talk it could be $250,000, but that was a number of years ago. But it also depends upon the extent of the deterioration as it currently stands. So maybe this is the kind of thing that would make sense as we come back, again, we don't have to wait 4 months necessarily. We can always just kind of do these kind of incrementally, but I might suggest that if we at least know what we're talking about, so we have a ballpark figure and then we can maybe go from there. And I will say, it certainly is a priority for the commission, and rightfully so, and I think for a lot of folks in town.
Counselor Vincent?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The estimate was $3,482 in 2007. To date, has the town ever allocated any money up to $3,482 to do the test?
Not to my knowledge.
So we have a period of about 16 years or so where we haven't done, coming up to 16 years that we haven't done the test. And now we're talking about maybe using general funds to fund that. I think we have an opportunity right now to fund at least the testing for that monument. And then we can come back and we can see if we want to allocate additional funds towards restoring it. The estimate was $80,000 to $150,000 back in 2007 because they didn't know what kind of damage was inside, and they needed to do the test in order to make that determination. But we have let all these years go by since 2007, and we haven't even allocated $3,500 to do a test. I think we owe it to the community, for the reasons that I articulated before, to at least consider using ARPA funds to fund the test, and then allow us to apply for the grants. The reason I picked those other two figures, the $15,000 figure and the $45,000 figure, is because then we can start writing for the two grants that I talked about. Until we have money allocated for that, we can't apply for those grants. There's no other way to fund the project. So that seed money, that ARPA money being allocated, even at $65,000, allows us to do the test and allows us to apply for the two grants, one of which has a due date of January. I honestly don't know the due date for the other one, but I think it's the latter part of next year, like sometime in the fall of next year. But the Veterans Heritage one has a due date of January for the grant. I mean, you can tell I've spent a lot of time doing research on this because I think this is an incredibly important project for the town to undertake when you've got something with that kind of history associated with it, and we haven't done anything to repair it for 120 years.
I think just to be clear on the point about the testing, to my understanding, that was never requested to be done.
I think Bob says in 2007,
Yeah.
I don't remember it being requested.
Because even in from the last meeting, the sense that I got was they had gotten those figures and they kind of knew like ballpark, but I'm not sure that the commission ever asked. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's why I said I would look into making sure we do this. I just think we need to have an understanding of like, are we talking $200,000? Are we talking $600,000? Because I think that matters. Because if we're asking for funding and grants and whatnot, then we are committing to a project. Let's just understand what we're talking about here. Because I think if it's a $200,000 discussion, that's very different than a $700,000 discussion, and then maybe we have to think about other ways, maybe some private, funding in addition to that, or whatever the case may be. So I don't know that it really much matters where I think it's probably going to be $10,000 or thereabouts, wherever that comes from, in order to at least get a baseline established for us.
Yeah, we can, whatever the council wants, we'll find it.
Anyone else have comments?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
I was looking this way.
I didn't have my hand up yet, so I was like, is it my turn? Thank you for doing this, and your rationale for things made perfect sense to me in terms of, one-time costs, things that can build upon other things. All makes sense, but I do have some questions. I do agree about doing the test and taking that money out of ARPA or coming out of our fund, however it is. I do think we should make that a priority. I also want to say is that that's a good example of why we should pursue becoming a member of the Community Preservation Act, becoming one of those communities that we should really pursue that, which is part of historical preservation, which I agree with is important. So I'd be interested in pursuing that again and bringing that up for a vote, that then maybe they can help us with the funding for that, for the repair. My other question is that WCAT, I think that $137,000, I'd like to see more money allocated to that. I agree with you about the high school, that should be part of the plan for the high school. But I also think that, looking at a streaming bill of, that will replace the funding that WCAT is losing because of cord cutting, I think that we should have a contingency, something that for 2 years, that money that's lost, because we could be looking at a couple of years before the streaming bill does take effect. So a measure to help in that. So I would like to see that. Senior housing project. Mike, I'm just curious what your idea is, and would it be low-income senior housing? What are you looking for? Because I'd be interested in hearing more about that if we can, let Mike talk to that. The other thing is the rail to trail. So this is what I'm a little confused about. The rail to trail, we don't have that money allocated. I thought the money had already been allocated for rail to trail.
For what part?
I don't know.
Okay, for design, some was allocated.
Yeah.
Some was voted on at town meeting.
Right.
There's about 300,000 left that hasn't been spent yet. It's going to take more to do the whole thing.
Okay.
To get to
I
the
thought
final
that we had already had the money dedicated to do the whole thing, but no.
To do the building, no. That was
No.
never going to be our money.
That was never going to be.
Always going to be through the TIP project, or it was never going to be Wakefield taxpayer money here.
Right, okay. And by spending the money now, is that it's going to jumpstart the project and
I
make
think it'll
it
get us to the
complete
finish line much quicker.
much
Yes.
quicker? And do you know about how much quicker, would you say?
Years.
Years quicker.
I mean, we will know, we could know by the end of the, beginning of the next year for the whole thing.
Okay,
But regardless of that, the paved portions will be, the crossings will be done and things like that, so
okay,
we have the money for that from a grant.
Okay.
That's separate.
okay. And
I know it's
the,
confusing, because you could design costs. and,
right, I know. I thought that we were
construction
all, I thought we were all set, that it was moving forward, but, okay, so that's good
costs.
to
Well, it
know.
is, it just needed more.
Money.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's.
Like everything
That's
else.
not really, it's set pending funding. I thought that had already been voted on. Okay, the sidewalk, how much do we have for sidewalks?
1.1 million.
1.1 million. How do you allocate which sidewalks? I know you mentioned
Right.
streets.
In the memo that came out, it gives each road what it's going to cost. So Parker Road is 135,000.
Right. I
Right.
know, but how did you choose which are those the only ones that don't have
These are new
sidewalks?
sidewalks.
Yeah.
And these are areas that we have had the most real interest in from the community. For instance, Elm Street, which is on here,
Mm-hmm.
that's a dearth of sidewalks for years. You know. Parker Road, another area. Lowell Street, probably recently we've had a few emails from people on Lowell Street. You think about, if you walk Lowell Street, you can walk here and then you get across, and sidewalks over here, then you get across. Water Street, there is, at the end of Montrose, there's no man's land there, getting out of there. But it was areas that have been identified throughout town.
Through
and
community.
also identified by the MAPC bike and ped plan.
Okay,
So it has been studied.
okay. So but most of it has been from community,
Community and the MAPC bike and ped plan.
okay.
Which we still haven't seen, by the way.
Yes. There's a problem with it.
Okay. I want to see it.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing on the fuel assistance, so we're dedicating $400,000 to that, which I'm fully supportive. It's going to be a terrible year for heat. But at the same time, there's also seems to be other sources coming around that are also seem to be popping up in terms of providing fuel assistance for people who are above that 60%, like that are 60 to 80%. But if we don't use it all, then that would come back. That would come back to us. Okay.
And remember how we presented that program was, we wanted to piggyback off of other programs. So you need to
Right.
have gone to Leo, right? And
Right.
gotten your money from them. And then $500 on top of that from us.
And then
So we're
that.
trying to really, stretch that for the homeowner.
So are we only going up to 60% of,
We're going to do whatever Leo does at this point.
okay,
Or you can go to the
Good Neighbor.
Good Neighbor.
Good Neighbor, they go up to 80% of,
And
yeah.
so just a point of information, I thought the proposal was that we would go up through the Good Neighbor program.
Yes, either
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, okay.
Either
Okay,
one,
we
yeah.
would, okay.
Either one, yeah.
Okay. And is Joe Kennedy,
Yeah, I don't know.
I think that's still going on too, is that I think that they will provide a tank, fill up your tank one time if you meet that allowance. So I just want to make sure that,
Yep.
we're, okay, so that's all fine, I'm just trying to find more money because I'm like, this really wasn't as much fun as I thought. I thought this was going to be so much fun, and now I'm like, not so much fun. I think those are my questions for now, and those are my comments. Is that the other thing is I would hold off on the conference centers. I know it's $75,000, but I would hold off in terms of making them hybrid capable because do we have a guarantee that meetings are going to be allowed to be hybrid?
Well, if you need to be at the meeting, okay, so if they do not extend the remote
Right.
capability, I think there are members of the public that would really benefit from the hybrid use. So every meeting, right now, every meeting is recorded via Zoom, right?
Right.
So Historic Commission that Councilor Dombrowski just mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
right? If they had to meet in person, okay, this all goes away, right?
Right.
And so then there's no capability now to record that for the public.
Oh, well, it could be very simple. You could just do it like an HDMI thing on a TV. I don't know exactly what I'm talking about, but I do it at BU. I plug in
Yeah.
things and it works.
Right, but, yes, but the thing you plug into needs to be there.
But you could just
So-
do it, why couldn't you just do it, if it's only for viewing the meeting live, why couldn't you still set up?
No, we have to record
You have
it,
to
though.
record
it. Record
So
it.
people
But why
watch it, like on demand, basically.
So we need
Right,
the
I
equipment in
understand.
the rooms
In
to
the-
record
right.
the meeting so that people
So we would have
outside can see
a big monitor, not every room has a big monitor. Not every room has a console a camera. Not every room has a console that can be worked by the chair of that meeting. So when you look at that and you look at all the rooms, that's what that would
Do
allow us
we
to
have,
do.
do we have the actual price that it would be 75,000?
Yeah,
Do we have
yeah.
it?
When you're thinking that was 10 rooms, it's not that bad per room.
No. I'm just thinking if there could be like I don't know. And that's so that people can watch it. Because we can't just set up a Zoom, I guess, in terms of,
Well, if you can set up a Zoom if you don't have to be in the meeting together. If you don't have to be a quorum together, you can certainly set up a Zoom like we do now for most of the boards. Okay, but that may or may not go away, and some boards want to meet, right? Some don't.
Right.
So, we would like to give them the ability to do either way.
okay.
I remember last year when the state did not extend the ability to have remote meetings, and then they went into we had to actually cancel some meetings because we didn't know,
Yeah,
it wasn't allowable when they wanted to
Right.
post. They got canceled for a few days, and they got it all
Yeah.
put together on like a late Friday afternoon session
Yeah.
at the legislature. But I just think that the public has really gotten used to be able to see every meeting whenever they want to, and that has really been probably been great for the boards, and it's been great for the public to see, what happens and how it works, and they're able
Yeah.
to be up to date on stuff. So
No,
that would just allow us to do that in a lot of different locations.
okay. Just trying to save money, I don't know. Grasping for straws.
And this is something to look at, and I'm sure, tech savvy people, but like at work, we have it's called a hub, and it's got a camera and a laptop.
Right.
And you just rent that, so the school has one or two.
Yeah.
And then, instead of doing it in each room, like town hall would
Right.
have one, the library would have one.
But I
you know?
think we need to think about the people that are going to be coming in and running those meetings.
Yep,
There's
that's
not going to be
true.
someone that's tech
Yeah.
savvy,
Yeah.
so you have a
Yeah.
console, and sorry to everybody who runs those meetings, maybe they're insulted right now. But, there's a console, your meeting is all scheduled, it's really a very touch, boom,
Yeah.
it goes on and you're all set. And it
That's true.
records automatically.
Well, yeah, that's
And
the
and
worst
also the fact
thing.
that there are multiple meetings that go on at
Yes.
the same time.
Right.
Like, planning board and school committee and
Yeah.
like 3 other committees are on
Right.
Tuesday nights. So
Yeah.
I think, the equipment maybe going from one room to another doesn't necessarily.
Yeah, this is fit in there. You're certainly not
Well,
going to
you
move
also
the-
don't want to say that it's going to be available. People can watch it live and not be there and then not have the technology work. That would be
Correct.
a bigger disaster than
Correct.
not having it at all.
Correct.
I think actually Madam Clerk is probably the best person to speak to this because she interfaces with everyone doing this, and my understanding is the more streamlined and straightforward we can keep it for everyone, the better, because
Yeah.
we have different age levels, different
Yeah.
technical
Yes.
Yeah.
capacities.
Yeah, no, that is.
Is that fair, Madam Clerk?
That seems like a big nod.
That's-
Yeah.
yes.
Leading question.
That is very true. Yeah.
Yes, very leading.
Okay,
Counselor
those
Smith-
are all my
oh,
questions. So
sorry.
that's okay.
Counselor Smith Galvin?
I don't have a lot to add. I really think having this 2.6 million in reserve gives us an incredible amount of flexibility. I am intrigued by the senior housing. Counselor McLean, I think, whether it's the Herd or Butler or whatever we have, I would be interested in hearing more about that. And I'm open to spending some money on the memorial, at least to get this assessment work done. But I'm pretty happy with what's in the memo.
Counselor Chines?
I wanted just to make a quick point, just to follow up on Counselor Dennehy's comment around WCAT. So from my perspective, this is just me speaking, I don't view the commitment that we as a council need to make to WCAT is limited to the $137,000 in the memo. I do think that there's a longer-term discussion around effectively paying WCAT fair market value for the work they do to broadcast our meetings, school committee meetings, town meetings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that ARPA funds are the right avenue to do that. I think that's a discussion as we do our operating budget over the next several months. I do hope that that's a discussion we have, and I think, Steve, you alluded to this in your comments as well. But I just wanted to make that point. I think, at least for me, if we do end up approving, some of what's here and it's limited to $137,000 on the CAT side, I don't think that's the end of the conversation. I think there's a separate conversation about, what do we do for the future.
Right.
That's precisely what my memo
Right.
to you was on.
Yep.
Market value.
Counselor McLean?
Just one final question, Steve. I'm still trying to entirely get my brain around the rail trail. Is this $1 million for design only, or is it design plus?
Design only.
Design only. And we can't speed up the construction, it's gonna be 2026, one way or the other?
That's the TIP program we would be under. Yeah.
Right. Is there an idea that we could not take this out of ARPA and bring it to town meeting, since there is some time between now and 2026?
For the construction?
For the design, for this $1 million.
Oh.
You need the design.
There's
to
like a,
get the
there's
You need
a
the design to
several
do
year,
that.
like,
Yeah.
gap though, between when you have design
Right,
ready and
yeah.
then
I
you're.
mean,
you
it
get on
would,
the
it, I
list.
mean, we would, it'd be great if we could get on the MPO list that you excluded, you talked, referred to, alluded to right now. That would move us quicker. If we went into the spring, I don't know if we might be adding a year or two to the final project.
So when the Department of Transportation website says this is scheduled for 2026,
Oh, yeah.
they don't really mean it?
I think they mean the old one, which isn't gonna be ready for 2026.
Okay.
The whole entire shebang,
Okay.
because they'll never be ready through the Reedy Meadow probably until 2028.
So can I just summarize a little bit of what I heard and then looking for maybe a motion on the memo, but there's a commitment from all of us to figure out something on senior housing. $1 million is just, without more explanation, is not what any of us want to do. But I think we've got a commitment that all of us want to address senior housing. Steve, it sounds like Mike and you can explore what other communities have done and come back to us, and it
Right.
doesn't need to be in 4 months or 6 months. Like, it actually would be great to have a presentation, and maybe we get an update of what we did at Harts Hill years ago, just of like, this is what we did in the past. So there's a commitment to that. There's a commitment to watch federal funding. So Julie and her new best friend, Kamala Harris, will hopefully get us money. And so we're going to watch that for energy projects, which we could, maybe get. There's a commitment for updates quarterly. That doesn't mean that we don't have the conversations when there's not updates,
Right.
but for monetary fiscal, we want quarterly of what's happening. We're going to do some exploration of fair market value of services for WCAT. I do want to point out that WCAT is the only nonprofit on this list, so it's all government agencies and then WCAT, so I want to be mindful of that too, but we do always thank them for their services and look forward to figuring out funding for them in the future. And then, Counselor Vincent, I hear what you're saying, and I also am listening to what Counselor Dombrowski said. And so if we funded the assessment of what the memorial will take, and then you and Steve with Erin and the Veterans Advisory Board and the Historic Commission really look at some of those grants, is that a step in the right direction? You've literally heard from all of us that we're committed to this, but I think $65,000 of just to get future grants when we haven't even written the grants seems a little putting the cart before the horse to me.
Well, I appreciate that, Madam Chair. I don't think after 120 years, it's putting the cart before the horse, but
Well,
what I
none
would
of
say.
us were here 120 years ago, so.
What I would say is it's a radiography test that needs to get done. I think at least funding needs to get allocated for that to get things moving. I certainly agree with that. Whether I have to sit down at some future date with Steve to talk about having money come out of general funds, or we allocate at least money towards testing tonight through the ARPA. If it was $3,482 in 2007, obviously it's more expensive now. If we allocated, I don't know, double that, $7,500, and then it didn't cost that, then the remainder would come back for us to decide how we want to allocate it for some of the resources that would be appropriate. But I think it's imperative that we get things moving, and the first step is to have the test done.
Great. And so, Counselor Dombrowski, what was the number that you just had at the meeting?
Yeah, I'm trying to recall back. I think we were talking like around 10 or thereabouts, like 10 to 15 is, I don't even think it was 15. I feel like I remember thinking like it was like under 10 even. And I was like, oh, we can find that.
So
I think 10 is,
Steve,
10 is a
can
good
you,
number,
can
yeah.
you find it, or do
Madam
we
Chair,
want
I
to use
actually
10?
I have it here. I have the estimate that was done in 2007.
I know, but I'm saying subsequent to that, they got a better ballpark. I feel like it wasn't from 2007 that we're relying on that number. I don't know exactly
I think
where
10.
they came up with the number, but
I mean, but I think we can find 10 in the general operating.
No, I would take 10 out of opera personally.
If I may, I would suggest, I mean, we don't know the exact number. We don't know the exact number until you actually quote the opportunity out. And so I would suggest maybe previewing a motion perhaps, that maybe we look at 10,000 for now. And obviously, if it's less, we spend
Right.
less. If it's more,
Or we'll come back.
we can figure out, I'm
I
sure
can figure
Steve
that
can
out.
work
Yeah.
your magic.
We could also just approve the cost of what it is, estimated to be around $10,000. And then if it ends up being $12,000.
Right.
We can still go forward with it without having to come back here. It's not gonna be like a $50,000 test.
No.
Yep.
So I don't know, we have to necessarily assign like an exact dollar value to it. If we just understand, like, again, it's around, I think it's probably 10 or less.
So, Madam Chair, maybe just to further the discussion, I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations from Mr. Mayo for the spending of ARPA funds as written, with the addition of $10,000 for radiographic testing, if that is the right word, for the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, and with the further stipulation that we receive updates at least quarterly on spending.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Second by Counselor Dombrowski. Okay, any further discussion on the motion?
I do have a question. Is that some of the money that if we want to see more money allocated to certain areas, we can revisit that in?
Yes, I did not take this as tree replacement will get no more money, for instance.
Right.
This is the start of a conversation.
Okay.
And saving the 2.6 minus 10,000 now is to further the continuation. But
Okay.
I think if any of these, I think it's a further conversation if anything, again, anything ends up, tree replacement's kind of the easiest one of like, to actually do it, we need, 50,000 more.
So I do think it was really smart too. I mean, I like the strategy that you laid out, and I also like the leaving money, the 2.6 is, I think that's really wise. So then we can revisit some of these things that we think are important that we can decide.
Yep. And
later on.
And I think as Steve said and Councilor Dombrowski talked about earlier, like with inflation, like we're gonna have problems that we can't even anticipate, unfortunately, right? So and so I think to save some of that money for something that isn't even on our wish list, that's gonna come down the pipeline, I think that's really smart to do.
Like the food pantry.
So the food pantry is a perfect example, or, the Boys and Girls Club or things like that. I think we're gonna have some community members, language services in the schools that we're not even aware of yet. Okay.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, of course.
I just want to say is that with all of these things that we have going on and all of the studies that we have going on in terms of the master plan and we're going to need a senior level person, I think, that is going to be helping us with the planning for our future and implementing. So that is my final word on that for tonight anyway. But I think that that's going to be.
tonight. You final word is tonight.
Do you mean like a planner or something?
Yes, like a planner, maybe like a planner.
What
maybe
would
like
you
a senior
call
planner.
that?
Maybe. And maybe we can come up with, an idea for that. But I
Other
think
budget
towns,
discussion.
other
Yes.
towns might be calling it a strategic officer.
Yes, a strategic,
so
yes, a strategic.
Not just planning.
No, it's a strategic and somebody who's able to do a whole lot with all of this and has a vision and can move things forward.
Very good. Okay, can we take a vote? All in favor of Jonathan's motion? Say aye.
Aye.
7-0. Thank you, and thank you, Steve, for all your work on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will add this to a meeting in a couple of months to get updates. Item 8, appointments.
Madam Chair, I'll move to appoint Gitika Umbanyu to the Human Rights Commission to fill a 3-year term expiring April 30, 2025.
Second?
Second, great. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye, 7-0.
Move to appoint Joseph Dorney to fill a position on the Housing Authority for the state appointee term through June 24th, 2027.
Second?
Any discussion? Counselor Dombrowski?
So this is one where I'd actually like to see Leonard Coughlin in this. He's Marine Corps and Air Force. He's been a life, I guess it looks like life, I don't know how old he is, but 67 years in Wakefield. And he doesn't have like the direct like housing experience as the other candidate you've offered up. And I think like someone with an outside perspective would kind of be nice, especially a veteran, because I think a lot of the folks, that we're working with, may also be veterans as well. So I realize that you have a motion, but I would actually suggest that I think he would be better because he offers a different perspective than just someone who's worked their whole entire life in housing.
Liaison, Bob Vincent, do you want to add anything?
Well, yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Of course, I'm always an advocate for getting veterans involved in the community, but I do pay a lot of attention to what the Housing Authority has recommended. I also note that this is for the state position, and the state position may very well have reporting obligations to the state when they sit on the Wakefield Housing Authority. So I think that having somebody that's got public housing and knowledge of housing procedures is beneficial because of that person's role as the state appointee to the Wakefield Housing Authority. So I thought Mr. Dorney, based on his experience, and he's lived in Wakefield for 28 years as well, was probably a choice I would have agreed with the Wakefield Housing Authority if they asked me my opinion.
Counselor Smith-Galvin, did you have your hand up?
No, I was going to say that my reading was that was the recommendation of the Housing Authority.
We have a motion that was seconded. Let's take a vote on the motion. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? 6-1.
All right, Madam Chair, move to appoint Eliza Margolis, William Buswell, and Fiona Racine as student members of the Environmental Sustainability Committee with terms expiring June 30, 2023.
Second.
Okay, motion was seconded. Any discussion? Counselor McLean?
My only problem with these resumes is I find them very intimidating.
They are quite
I
impressive.
can tell you as the liaison to the youth council, I hear you.
That's it.
We have a lot of talented young people in Wakefield.
It is great. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous, 7-0.
All right, Madam Chair, move to appoint Thomas Lucy to the open voting position on the Zoning Board of Appeals to fill the term through April 30, 2023.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0.
And Madam Chair, on that, I'd further move, or make another motion, to authorize advertising for an alternate member for the Zoning Board of Appeals to replace Mr. Lucy.
Great. Seconded?
Second.
Second, great. And all in favor? That's 7-0. Thank you.
All right, and finally, move to advertise for a voting member for the Conservation Commission to fill an unexpired term through April 30, 2025.
Second.
Great. Any discussion? And all in favor? 7-0. Thank you very much. We did item 9 going on, and actually, I do want to wrap that up saying thank you to everyone that applies. We cannot run our town without volunteers, and always look for opportunities to please apply, continue to look and apply for other positions as they get open. We did item 9. Item 10, 2023 renewal licenses.
Madam Chair, given the hour, if you want to take this as one slate, I'll have them, we can certainly do that.
Read
if
my
you want.
mind.
That was great.
All right, Madam Chair, move to approve the common victualler, entertainment, liquor license, lodging house, automated device, Class 1 and Class 2 licenses to the entities presented in the packet.
Second.
Great. All in favor? Great, 7-0. Thank you.
And I will say there are no issues with any of
Yeah,
them. They're all
I figured.
yeah.
Great. Item 11, donations.
Move to accept and expend a gift or gifts in the amount of $5 to the Human Rights Commission from various donors with thanks.
Second.
Great. All in favor? Great, 7-0.
All right, move to accept and expend gifts in the amount of $775 to the BB Library from donors with thanks.
Second.
All in favor? 7-0.
And move to accept and expend gifts in the amount of $100 to the Youth Action Team from donors with thanks.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? 7-0. Thank you. Item 12, warrants. Counselor Vincent?
Warrants at 10:27 at night, how exciting. Warrants 14 and 18 were pretty standard, straightforward, 2.7 million, 2.4 million. Treasurer's bills for payroll taxes, school and town retirement withholdings, insurance. 16 was a little different, it is 10 million. The highlights on that is the town council bills, we actually have bills, was for the high school feasibility study and the public safety building and capital project. Treasurer's bill for payroll taxes and debt service payments for the Galvin Middle School are on there. The DPW bills were for building maintenance and the MWRA water and sewer assessment. There's also group insurance bill for the employee health insurance and the light department bills for the cost of energy. And that was the reason that particular warrant was much higher than what you normally see. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Item 13, approval of minutes.
Move to approve the October 24th Town Council minutes.
Second.
Great, all in favor? Aye, 7-0.
And move to approve the October 24th Executive Session Town Council meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
And all in favor? Aye, 7-0. Great. Item 14, announcements. Counselor Dennehy.
The survey for the master plan is out, and encourage everybody, I think it's going to be open until November 18th. You can find that survey on the website. Encourage everybody to take a few minutes to complete it. It's your opportunity to have your voice heard, and also to attend town meeting on Saturday. Another opportunity to have your voice heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Chines?
Thank you. Just a couple of things. First of all, for everyone who attended the Veterans Day ceremony as well as the sign dedication at Veterans Field, it was a great day. Thank you very much to our Veterans Advisory Board. Thanks to Dan and Lois Benjamin for the generous donation of the sign as well. I also did want to highlight, kind of continuing the theme of service, on Friday, the Youth Council had a community cleanup at the Common as well as at the Galvin, and really appreciate their volunteering there and all the folks that came out, including 4 children that I may have dragged out potentially against their will, but they did a great job. I have some congratulations I wanted to share. So there's a lot to celebrate in Wakefield lately. I think we've all read about the Wakefield Memorial High School football team is now 10-0. They've made it to basically the Final Four for Division III this year, which is really incredible. They're the first 10-0 team ever, 10-0 football team ever in Wakefield's history, which is pretty cool. So we wish them luck. They're playing North Attleboro next. I think date and time to be announced. Also on the football field, our amazing Warrior Marching Band has had another great season. So they finished the season with a platinum performance in Reading, which was just incredible. And also made it to the finals at the Bands of America Regionals down at Rutgers in New Jersey. And so really, really great, outstanding year for them. Those kids work incredibly hard, and it's great to see them recognized for that. And then finally, just wanted to mention Brad Simpson, actually Steve's old basketball coach, is going to be inducted into the Mass Basketball Coaches Hall of Fame, or was inducted yesterday, I believe. So congratulations to him. I mean, a great mentor to so many players, but also a great teacher as well for many years. So great to see him honored for that. And then finally, just wanted to mention, I do have office hours tomorrow evening at the library, 6 to 7:30. So please come by and say hello.
Thank you, Counselor Chines. Counselor
I'll just say
Smith-Galvin?
that the turkey trot returns to Lake Quannapowitt on Thursday morning for Thanksgiving Day. Yes, it's being organized by the track boosters. So a great fundraiser for them and always a fun event. So I can't remember what time, but it's like 8 or 9.
And everyone who finishes will get a pie at the end of it, a mini pie.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh,
Noreen and I don't any pies.
copying the feast or
I'm
fowl
looking
up
at
in
the
Andover.
time, hold on. It starts at 8 a.m.
8, yep.
8 a.m.
It's easy online sign up, yep.
Counselor Vincent?
I wanted to say something about Veterans Day, but I didn't want to say it as a member of the town council. I actually want to say it as a veteran. So, what I want to say is that Wakefield does an incredible job of honoring veterans. I've lived here since 2014, and every year I'm impressed with what is put together to honor our veterans. I especially also want to thank Lois and Dan Benjamin for their generous donation. I want to thank Madam Chair for giving me the privilege to be able to talk at the dedication for the sign. I also want to congratulate the Veterans Advisory Board and our Veteran Service Officer for, you think about what Paul Cancelleri had to do that day with putting together and be the master of ceremonies for the sign dedication, and then literally 2 hours later was the master of ceremonies for the dedication at the Galvin. And what especially impressed me was how much of the community he got involved in the process. The students that came and sang and played. I think that's very important as a veteran when you can get our youth all the way up through our senior citizens involved in something like that. And I just have been incredibly impressed with what this town has done to honor veterans. So I thank you all very much. Now I'll put my sign back.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back, Counselor Vincent. Anyone else?
I just wanted to jump on Brad Simpson's, talk about Brad Simpson. What a great man, what a great coach. Touched the lives of so many young people in this town. And I want to say was really a family affair, what a gem of a family. I think his wife Judy was at every game for all those years. And wonderful children, Scott and Beth. So couldn't be prouder of Coach Simpson. So thank you for bringing it up, Councilor Chines.
Just two little things touched upon. Veterans Day ceremony included chat about a new movie coming out called Devotion. It opens November 23rd. It actually was the story is about Thomas J. Hudner's father, Thomas Hudner, but I don't, Jr., who, and so just everyone marked that because we showed a little preview at it at the Veterans Day ceremony, and we will see everyone at town meeting on Saturday at 9 a.m. at the Galvin Middle School. Item 15, matters not anticipated for the agenda? No? Okay, item 16, I adjourn this meeting until our next council.
We don't need a motion.
I need a motion.
I
Do
move
I
to adjourn.
have- it is late. We have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, great. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. There we go again. Adjourn. Our next meeting is Monday.